Chapter 980. Senior Brother. With a soft holler, Sword Sex Qin Pianran stood out. Boom! Qin Pianran's body swayed and a phantom charged out of her body with sword qi, charging towards the scarlet flame dermic body without hesitation. In a situation where all the Dao Lords were retreating, afraid that they would not be able to dodge in time, she stood out. Qin Pianran's heaven and earth dharma characteristic was known as the startling sword body, and was also one of the legacy dharma characteristics of Sword Sect. It was 70 feet tall. Under normal circumstances, the startling sword body was definitely a top-tier dharma characteristic. However, in the face of the 90 feet tall supreme dharma characteristic, her dharma characteristic was like a child that charged forward like a moth darting into a flame. Qin Pianran ignored her heaven and earth dharma characteristic. In a flash, she arrived beside Dao Lord Immortal's sword, and helped him up before retreating rapidly. Boom! The two dharma images of heaven and earth collided, exploding with a loud bang that shook the heavens and the earth. Qin Pianran's startling sword body only managed to defend for a moment before it was shattered by the scarlet flame dermic body, that had lost an arm and turned into nothingness. Qin Pianran's essence spirit was shaken and grunted dully. She staggered and her face turned much paler. However, because of that delay, she had already escaped the battlefield with Dao Lord Immortal's sword, and was temporarily out of danger. Junior sister, thank you. Dao Lord Immortal's sword panted heavily and felt a sense of lingering fear. Instinctively, he gripped Qin Pianran's slender hand tightly and his palms were filled with cold sweat. Senior brother, it's good that you're fine. That person is too strong. Let's return to the sect first. Qin Pianran's heart skipped a beat when Dao Lord Immortal's sword grabbed her hand. Her face flushed red as she persuaded softly. Dao Lord Immortal's sword gradually composed himself and calmed down. When he saw Qin Pianran's blushing face, his heart skipped a beat and he whispered, Junior sister, I understand your feelings for me. Don't worry, I won't let you down. Yes. Qin Pianran lowered her head and replied softly. After so many years, she had finally heard these words from her senior brother. At this moment she felt incomparably happy. Her nose was sour and her eyes were red. Many of the Dao Lords present remained calm when they saw this, but two of them sneered inwardly. One of them was Dao Lord Cloud Rain. He was an expert in love and was experienced. Naturally, he could tell that Dao Lord Immortal's sword was merely patronizing Qin Pianran. The other was Fairy Snowflake. That was because previously, Dao Lord Immortal's sword had even expressed his love for her, but she rejected him. The Crimson Flame battle form stood in the middle of the battlefield, its long crimson hair dancing in the wind. Its body was covered in raging flames, and its might was rampant. It did not continue to pursue. Hakuya looked at Dao Lord Immortal's sword who had fled into the distance with a mocking look in his eyes as he declared, the Dharma characteristic ranking this time round is truly lousy. Even the number 1 of the Dharma characteristic ranking is nothing much. Dao Lord Immortal's sword grit his teeth and veins popped on his forehead with an indignant expression. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, this kind of crushing defeat caused him to lose all face. It would not take long for the news of the defeat to be spread across the entire Middle Continent and the cultivation world. Dao Lord Immortal's sword's heart was filled with endless hatred and anger. His gaze shifted between Hakuya and Su Zimo. Hakuya was the one who gave him today's humiliation, and Su Zimo was definitely involved as well. If he could have obtained the heaven-slaying sword art back in Thousand Demon Valley and cultivated it, the outcome of today's battle would have been completely different. Hakuya waved his hand and said coldly, get lost. Remember not to come to 100 Refinement Sect to strut around in the future. I'm only teaching you a lesson this time round. That old thing. Dao Lord Cloud Rain cursed internally. He thought that Hakuya would start a massacre in his rage and become hot-blooded, sowing enmity with the few major immortal sections. To think that Hakuya would stop in time. That was Hakuya. He had grasped the right amount of time in the middle. Not only did he not become enemies with the major immortal sects, he also achieved the goal of establishing dominance and intimidating them. Today, not only did they have to retreat, anyone in the cultivation world who wanted to touch Su Zimo would have to go through some trouble in the future. A situation like this where they charged into 100 Refinement Sect to demand for someone would never happen again. Extreme Fire. I'll definitely take revenge for today's humiliation in the future. Dao Lord Immortal Sword clenched his fists tightly and said through gritted teeth. You won't have a chance, Hake Dojin said indifferently. I have to thank you for being able to sense the opportunity to break through so quickly. Many Dao Lords were shocked. Breakthrough? If he broke through from the Dharma characteristic realm, wouldn't he be at the conjoint body realm? Dao Lord Immortal Sword could tell what Hake Dojin meant as well. His blood chi attacked his heart and he spat out another mouthful of blood, looking much more dispirited. It was a crushing defeat. Hake Dojin did not take him seriously at all in this battle. Hake Dojin was using him to establish his dominance, intimidate and even use him as a stepping stone. Senior brother, let's go. When he saw Dao Lord Immortal Sword in such a state, Qin Pianran felt a sense of pity and persuaded gently, Senior brother, you're a titular disciple of the sect and your talent is definitely not inferior to anyone. Go back and continue cultivating. You'll definitely be able to make a comeback. Titular disciple? Talent? All those words were extremely ear-piercing to Dao Lord Immortal Sword. In fact, he even felt that Qin Pianran was mocking him. Humph! Dao Lord Immortal Sword's expression was cold as he flung Qin Pianran's arm away viciously. He had completely forgotten that the woman beside him had just saved his life. Qin Pianran sighed gently but was not angry. In her opinion, anyone would lose their composure after receiving such a blow. She believed that her senior brother was not targeting her. Fellow Taoists who are here to congratulate can stay as guests in 100 Refinement Sect. Hake Dojin surveyed his surroundings and said slowly, as for those with ulterior motives, please return. Men, send the guests off. Many Dao Lords could sense that Hake Dojin's aura was rising continuously, and had reached a critical point. Hake Dojin was about to break through to the conjoint body realm. It's a rare opportunity. I'll be thick-skinned and stay to observe. Dao Lord Divine Moon smiled gently. Not bad. To think that I would have such an opportunity after coming to congratulate you. Another Dharma Dao Jun clapped and smiled. Not everyone had the chance to witness a breakthrough to the conjoint body realm. For all the Dao Lords present, it was an extremely precious experience. As for Dao Lord Immortal Sword and the others, they were naturally embarrassed to stay after being chased away. All of them turned to leave with dark expressions. If you allow it, I'd like to stay and observe as well. Fairy Snowdrift cupped her fists. Sure, Hake Dojin nodded. Fairy Snowdrift had remained neutral right from the beginning and Hake Dojin would not target her. The Extreme Fire, see you in the future. Dao Lord Cloud Rain knew his place and cupped his fists before turning to leave. Su Zimo looked at Yen Beichen. Although nobody knew the motive of Yen Beichen's visit, if he wanted to stay, Su Zimo would definitely speak up for him and Hake Dojin would not reject him either. However, at that moment, Yen Beichen stood up expressionlessly and turned to leave without saying a single word the entire time. The remaining Dao Lords all frowned, completely confused. Chapter 981. What is this Shura doing here? Did he come to 100 Refinement Sect to take a look before leaving? I'm not sure. That person has always been unscrupulous. Who knows what he's thinking? He's probably here for Su Zimo as well. However, when he saw Hake Dojin's combat strength, he knew that he was no match for him and fled. Many Dao Lords looked at Yen Beichen's back view and discussed softly. Su Zimo frowned slightly. He was probably the only one who knew that Yen Beichen definitely had a motive for coming here, and it was very likely for him. Everyone, please come to the inner hall. Hake Dojin said and nodded to Su Zimo before turning to walk into 100 Refinement Sect. Hake Dojin was about to break through to the conjoint body realm and this was an important matter. Su Zimo did not disturb him because of Yen Beichen. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and walked out of 100 Refinement Sect alone. Uncle Master, where are you going? Dao Lord Scarlet Star was about to leave when he bumped into Su Zimo and asked casually. It's nothing. I'm going out for a walk, Su Zimo replied ambiguously. Dao Lord Scarlet Star reminded, Uncle Master, be careful. Don't leave 100 Refinement Sect. Dao Lord Immortal Sword and the others shouldn't have gone far yet. With that said, Dao Lord Scarlet Star left in a hurry to inform the elders of the sect. Hake Dojin was about to break through to the Dharma characteristic realm, and all the conjoint body elders of 100 Refinement Sect had to appear to protect him. Nothing must happen during this process. At that moment, everyone's attention was on Hakka Dojin, and no one noticed Suzumo's departure. Suzumo continued forward and sped outside 100 Refinement Sect. Passing by the entrance of 100 Refinement Sect, Suzumo came before the gatekeeper boy and asked, "Where did the Dharma Daojun go?" "Over there." The gatekeeper boy pointed at him. Suzumo nodded. Without hesitation, he ran in the direction the boy had pointed. Even if he met Tao Lord Immortal Sword and the others, he was not afraid. Although his battle prowess was inferior, he could rely on his many trump cards, such as the blood escape art, to escape with his life. After running for a short distance, Suzumo's heart stirred as if he had sensed something. He lowered his body and his entire body was almost touching the ground. His hands and feet moved at the same time. His body wriggled like a huge python and slowly slithered forward without making a sound. Suzumo only stopped when he arrived at a dense patch of grass. He squinted his eyes and looked ahead. His ears twitched as he listened carefully. There were a few figures standing in the air in front of him. Tao Lord Immortal Sword and Qin Pianran of the Sword Sect. There was also Tao Lord Cloud Rain, Tao Lord Breaking Sky of Heavenly Dipper Sect, Tao Lord Fire Cloud of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Tao Lord Cloud Sun of Primordial Chaos Sect, Monk Kong One of Formless Temple, and Monk Liao Ming of Wisdom Temple. There was also Tao Lord Heaven Sea of the Five Elements Sect, one of the upper sections. The 9 Tao Lords stood together. Another figure stood opposite them. He wore a black robe, had a cold expression, and carried a blood-red saber on his shoulder. "Shura Yanbeichen." "Shura, why are you following us?" Tao Lord Cloud Rain frowned slightly and asked impatiently. Shura was eccentric and bloodthirsty. Even people of the fiend sects were unwilling to interact with him and avoided him. Yanbeichen replied indifferently, "My Tao title is Shura. Naturally, I'm here to kill." Tao Lord Cloud Rain asked, "Kill who?" "All of you." Yanbeichen said 2 words and the scene fell silent. Fufu. Haha. Immediately after, Tao Lord Breaking Skies, Tao Lord Fire Cloud and the others laughed mockingly. "Are you joking with us?" Chaos Essence Sect's Tao Lord Cloud Sun sneered. Among them, they were either at late stage or perfected Dharma characteristic realm. Furthermore, there was an existence like Tao Lord Cloud Rain. Although Shura was extremely famous, he had just entered the Dharma characteristic realm. Everyone truly did not take him seriously. If not for the fact that Tao Lord Cloud Rain was present, they would have killed the Azura before them in the name of slaying fiends. Among the 9 Tao Lords, there were a few who did not laugh. Tao Lord Cloud Rain was one of them. That was because he knew that Shura never joked. If Shura said that he wanted to kill, he would definitely kill. Tao Lord Immortal Sword frowned and looked at Shura with wariness in his eyes. If he was in his peak condition, he could naturally suppress Shura with ease. But now that he was severely injured and his heaven and earth Dharma characteristic was destroyed, he could not condense it within a short period of time. If he were to truly fight against Shura, the outcome would be unpredictable. Thankfully, there were 9 of them and there should not be any danger. Tao Lord Heaven Sea of 5 Elements Sect knew that he was the weakest among them, and did not have the right to mock Shura. Therefore, he coughed gently and asked, "Fellow Taoist, we have no feud with you. Why do you want to kill us?" Shura never needs a reason to kill. Yanbeichen's gaze intensified and killing intent burst forth. Without any warning, his shoulders shrugged and the blood-colored saber jumped up as though it was alive. The blood vessels on the saber expanded and blood chi filled the air. Swash! There was a flash of blood. It was too fast. Tao Lord Heaven Sea was stunned. The next moment, his head flew high into the air and sprayed blood everywhere. In midair, the headless corpse fell. His essence spirit had long been minced by the sharp saber chi, and he did not even have a chance to escape. Tao Lord Heaven Sea was dead. Even until his death, he did not understand why he died. More than that, he did not expect Shura to be so decisive and not give him any chance to react. Suzumo, who was sprawled in the grass, was shocked when he saw that and a look of realization flashed through his eyes. He finally understood why Shura was here. Shura was here to kill. Kill for him. Suzumo was right. News of the Thousand Crane Tea Party spread throughout the Middle Continent and Yanbeichen naturally heard about it as well. Furthermore, Yen Beichen knew that the immortal sects such as Sword Sect and Chaos Essence Sect would definitely not let this matter rest, and would definitely take action. Therefore, even though he had just entered the Dharma characteristic realm, he rushed over fearlessly when he heard that many Dao lords were looking for trouble with Su Zimo. It was just like how Yen Beichen, who was still at the Void Reversion realm, crossed a large region and traveled day and night for a year when he found out that Misty Peak was in trouble. In the end, he resolved the crisis of Misty Peak almost single-handedly. Everyone thought that Shura was heartless and did not care about his family. However, Su Zimo knew that even though the Azura attained his Dao through killing, there was still a boiling hot blood flowing through his bones. The only thing that was heartless was the Shura saber in his hands. Although Hakuya was strong, he was still wary and did not dare to kill Dao Lord Immortal Sword for real. Therefore, he stopped in time after achieving his goal of establishing dominance and intimidation. After all, Hakuya had to consider 100 Refinement Sect. As for Yen Beichen, he had no qualms. That was because he was Shura who attained his Dao through killing. Hakuya was only teaching Dao Lord Immortal Sword, and the others a lesson. However, Shura Yen Beichen had no intention of letting the 9 of them return alive. Many Dao Lords were shocked and retreated. Apart from Dao Lord Cloud Rain, no one expected Shura to dare to attack 1-on-9. Less than that, no one expected Shura's methods to be so terrifying that Dao Lord Heaven Sea was killed by a single slash before he could even react. Chapter 982. Shura. Dao Lord Breaking Skies of Heavenly Dipper Sect glared and hollered, "We didn't attack you on account of Dao Lord Cloud Rain. Don't push your luck. Cut the crap. I'll kill Cloud Rain too." Yen Beichen sneered and slashed forward with his blood-colored saber. Blood chi filled the air and a gigantic purgatory appeared in front of everyone, enveloping the remaining 8 Dao Lords. Purgatory saber intent. At this point of cultivation, one could conjure dermic powers to materialize and fight against the top dermic arts head-on. Although Yen Beichen had just entered the Dharma characteristic realm, his saber intent had already been cultivated to the peak. Instantly, the entire battlefield was filled with a sinister aura and fiend shadows. Blood flowed like rivers and corpses were strewn everywhere as ghostly wails could be heard. Heavenly Dipper Fist. Dao Lord Breaking Skies hollered and his blood chi surged as he channeled dermic powers and punched the surrounding purgatory. Firmament Art. Dao Lord Cloud Son of Chaos Essence Sect condensed a top-tier dermic art of his sect, wanting to break through the purgatory and communicate with heaven and earth. Amitba. Monk Kong One of Formless Monastery pressed his palms together and conjured hand seals, forming a formless dermic seal that smashed towards the surrounding purgatory as well. The Dharma Daojun present were all paragons of the various immortal and Buddhist sections. Otherwise, they would not have dared to rush to 100 Refinement Sect to ask for him. There was no need to say anything else. The Dao Lords had a tacit understanding and attacked at the same time, prepared to shatter the purgatory. In the eyes of many Dao Lords, although Shura was a titular disciple, he had just entered the Dharma characteristic realm after all. It was a fool's dream for him to want to fight against 8 alone. However, everyone had overlooked one thing. Among them, there were only 2 titular disciples. Dao Lord Immortal Sword was severely injured, and was supported by Qin Pian Ran. Neither of them attacked. As for Dao Lord Cloud Rain, he frowned and conjured a hand seal. A mist formed around him to defend against the purgatory saber intent without taking the initiative to attack. Among the people present, Dao Lord Cloud Rain was the one who knew Shura the best. If he went all out, he had a 60% chance of suppressing Shura. Although the 2 of them were both titular disciples and his cultivation realm was a level higher, his cultivation techniques and secret skills were not lethal enough against Shura. Shura was merciless and killed to prove his Dao. His 7 emotions threads and 6 desires palm had little effect on Shura. Moreover, Shura was merciless and bloodthirsty. He didn't even recognize his own family. If he really fought with his life on the line, even he would be afraid. Furthermore, both of them were titular disciples of the Fiend sects, and there was no need for them to fight the moment they met. At that thought, Dao Lord Cloud Rain conjured a dermic art and defended passively. Apart from the 3 of them, there were only 5 Dharma Daojun in the purgatory who had launched a counterattack. White bones! Yen Beichen shouted and waved his long saber. The dense saber aura surged within the purgatory. Crash. The corpses that had been lying motionless in the river of blood seemed to have sensed some sort of bizarre power and stood up one after another. One after another, they were densely packed. All of those skeletons were paragons that died in the hands of Yan Beichen when they were alive. There were not many nameless people. Bang! 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 The counterattack of Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others was blocked by the skeletons and could not shake the purgatory. However, the blood in the purgatory increased and was thicker than the ankles of everyone present. A sinister wind blew and the stench of blood filled the air. The skeletons could not defend against the dermic arts and weapons of Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others and retreated continuously. However, as long as they were not torn apart, even if they lost their arms and heads, the skeletons could still stand up and continue charging towards the 5 Tao Lords. Normally speaking, Buddhist dermic arts were the most effective against dermic arts of the fiend sections. However, the Buddhist dermic arts of Monk Kong Wan and Monk Liao Ming could not suppress Shura at all. Water could counter fire. But fire could also burn water into nothingness. Sanskrit echoed endlessly and a Buddhist light filled the air. However, the wails and howls of ghosts were even louder in the purgatory and blood chi surged into the skies, suppressing the Buddhist light viciously. Not only were the 5 Tao Lords unable to break through the purgatory, they were even in a stalemate. When he saw that, Qin Pianran asked softly with a grim expression, "Senior brother, can you do it?" Tao Lord Immortal Sword was silent as he looked at Tao Lord Cloud Rain without saying anything. Naturally, Qin Pianran noticed Tao Lord Cloud Rain's actions as well and whispered, "Tao Lord Cloud Rain is someone of the fiend sex after all and has no intention of attacking. Let's join forces and kill this fiend together with fellow Taoists of the immortal sex." When he saw that Tao Lord Cloud Rain did not take the initiative to attack, Qin Pianran's idea was to stand out and fight Shura together with Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others. However, Tao Lord Immortal Sword's thoughts were on how to escape. Right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Yan Beichen's glabella shone and a shuddering spirit consciousness fluctuation burst forth. A blood-colored saber formed from spirit consciousness appeared and slashed down viciously at Monk Liao Ming. Essence Spirit Secret Skill. Shurayu, Monk Liao Ming was alarmed. Before he could say anything, he hurriedly conjured his Essence Spirit Secret Skill as well, wanting to defend against the spirit consciousness blood saber. Boom! The two spirit consciousnesses collided. After a brief pause, Monk Liao Ming's spirit consciousness was sliced into two by Shura's spirit consciousness blood saber, and entered his head. Monk Liao Ming's body stiffened and his eyes widened. Gradually, his gaze dissipated and his life force drained rapidly as well. The spirit consciousness blood saber slashed down, but there were no injuries on Monk Liao Ming's face. However, his essence spirit in his consciousness had already been sliced into two by the blood saber, and was completely destroyed. This was a fight between essence spirits. The difference of a single move could mean the end of his life. Monk Liao Ming did not even have the chance to release his heaven and earth dharma characteristic. Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others were shocked. Cultivators would not use essence spirit secret skills in a fight unless they had no other choice. After all, a fight between essence spirits was way too dangerous. Many times, even if one could kill their opponent with essence spirit secret skills, their own essence spirits might be shaken or even injured. It was difficult to recover from an injured essence spirit. That would have a huge impact on a cultivator's future cultivation. Just now in the battle between Tao Lord Immortal Sword and Hakura Dojin and 100 Refinement Sect, both parties had already unleashed their true flames and released their heaven and earth dharma characteristics. However, they did not use their essence spirit secret skills. That was also to leave a way out for themselves. Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others had not expected that Shura would suddenly release his essence spirit secret skill after a short battle, and leave no way out for himself. The Azura's killing intent was so heavy that it made one tremble in fear. Less than that, they had not expected Shura's essence spirit secret skill to be so terrifying that it could kill Monk Liao Ming instantly. What a lunatic! Tao Lord Cloud Rain cursed internally. Initially, he wanted to rely on his powerful strength to watch the battle from the side. But now that Shura had even released his essence spirit secret skill, he was afraid that the spirit consciousness blood saber would turn around and slash towards him. Others might not be able to do something like that, but Shura was definitely capable of it. The mist within Tao Lord Cloud Rain's body surged and pushed away the white skeletons that were charging over. Arriving beside the purgatory, he flipped his palm and landed it on the purgatory. Boom! The purgatory was penetrated by his palm. Tao Lord Cloud Rain moved and sped into the distance in a flash. He had already cultivated to this realm, and if nothing went wrong, he would definitely be able to advance to the conjoint body realm in the future. He truly did not want to provoke a ruthless person like Shura for no reason. Chapter 983. Tao Lord Cloud Rain's escape caused Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others to panic. Swash! The spirit consciousness blood saber descended once more and slashed towards Chaos Essence Sex Tao Lord Cloud Sun. Fellow Taoists, help me! At the same time that Tao Lord Cloud Sun cried for help, he released his Essence Spirit secret skill right away. What AF * King Lunatic? Tao Lord Breaking Skies cursed. Everyone fight it out! Tao Lord Fire Cloud roared. Die fiend! Suddenly Monk Kongwen's Dharma characteristic turned solemn and golden light shone. The three of them released their Essence Spirit secret skills at the same time. God-slaying sword. Qin Pianran hollered softly and touched his glabella with his fingertip. A spirit consciousness sword was condensed and slashed towards the spirit consciousness blood saber. Tao Lord Immortal Sword watched coldly from the sidelines without attacking. Many spirit consciousnesses collided silently. However, under Su Zimo's gaze, the void where the spirit consciousnesses collided distorted and trembled with a shuddering power. The five Dharma Daojun shuddered. Tao Lord Cloud Sun suffered an even greater impact and grunted. As for the spirit consciousness blood saber, it was shattered by the impact of the five spirit consciousnesses as well. Yen Beichen's face turned pale instantly. However, he pursed his lips tightly and did not say anything. Su Zimo's heart sank. Judging from Yen Beichen's condition, his essence spirit seemed to have suffered quite a bit of shock as well and was most likely injured. The five Dharma Daojun were definitely not ordinary. Although Yen Beichen was a titular disciple, he had just entered the Dharma characteristic realm. It was already rare for him to be able to fight against the five Dharma Daojun's essence spirits without being disadvantaged. Furthermore, he had killed the essence spirit of a Tao Lord before this. Su Zimo did not appear rashly. Given his strength, he would only be a burden if he rushed in. Instead, he would distract Yen Beichen. If someone released their Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic, they could kill him with a casual flick of their fingers. Just as Su Zimo was worrying, Yen Beichen's eyes lit up. He didn't take a break to adjust himself. He stepped forward and attacked again. Voila! Within the purgatory, the blood river surged into the skies and created huge waves that enveloped Tao Lord Immortal Sword and the others. The white skeletons let out a series of roars and launched another attack. In the Essence Spirit fight just now, Tao Lord Cloud Sun's Essence Spirit suffered the greatest impact, and there was even a scar on it. Cosmic form. Tao Lord Yunyang wanted to summon his Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic, but he was still a step too slow. Just as a phantom rushed out of his body, the blood river rushed over and the corpses surrounded him. Before the Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic was released, it was shattered. Tao Lord Cloud Sun opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Die! Yen Beichen's cold voice rang in his ears. Immediately after, a blood-red light flashed past his throat. The sharp saber chi burst forth and instantly killed his primordial spirit. Tao Lord Cloud Sun of Primordial Chaos Sect was dead. Boom! 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 That single delay allowed Tao Lord Breaking Skies, Tao Lord Fire Cloud and Monk Kong went to summon their Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristics one after another, and gigantic figures rose from the ground. Rumble! Boom! The white bone purgatory could not withstand the impact of the three Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristics, and was shattered, gradually dissipating. The three Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristics were all more than 60 feet tall. To be able to cultivate a Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic that was 50 feet tall, one could already be considered a rather strong Tao Lord. To be able to condense a Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic that was more than 60 feet tall, one could definitely be considered a paragon. If they were against an ordinary Dharma Daojun, they would be able to suppress their opponent. Unfortunately, they were facing Shura Yen Beichen. Boom! Yen Beichen's body swayed and a blood-red phantom rushed out from above his head. Instantly, it rose to a height of 60 feet and was still growing. 70 feet. 80 feet. 85 feet. This Asura Dharma body climbed all the way to a height of 85 feet before it stopped. Yin Baichen was at the early stage Dharma characteristic realm. If he could condense a heaven and earth Dharma characteristic that was 85 feet tall at early stage, there was a high chance that he could reach 89 feet and be comparable to Tao Lord Immortal Sword's lifeless sword body at perfected Dharma characteristic realm. If he had any great opportunity, it was not impossible for him to attain a 90 feet supreme Dharma characteristic. Generally speaking, cultivators would be able to condense a heaven and earth Dharma characteristic upon entering the Dharma characteristic realm. However, the initial height of the Dharma characteristic would determine its future potential. If a cultivator's heaven and earth Dharma characteristic was only 10 feet tall or 20 feet tall at the beginning, even if that cultivator cultivated to the perfected Dharma characteristic realm, his Dharma characteristic would definitely not exceed 50 feet. If that cultivator could condense a heaven and earth Dharma characteristic that was 50 feet tall at early stage Dharma characteristic realm, there was a chance that the Dharma characteristic would grow to 60 feet tall or even break through 60 feet at the perfected Dharma characteristic realm. For example, the legacy Dharma characteristic of Diamond Monastery, the 60 feet golden body. At early stage Dharma characteristic realm, one could condense a 60 feet tall golden body. This meant that when the monk of Diamond Monastery cultivated to the perfected Dharma characteristic realm, his golden body could grow to a height of 70 feet. That was already a rather terrifying height. A heaven and earth Dharma characteristic that was 70 feet tall was already qualified to fight for the Dharma characteristic ranking. But now, Yin Baichen's 85 feet tall Shura-dermic body caused Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others to panic and no longer have any thoughts of resisting. Escape. Without hesitation, the three Tao Lords turned and fled, allowing their heaven and earth Dharma characteristics to block their backs. Kill! Yin Baichen hollered, and his blood-red Shura-dermic body had a torrential blood chi. Wielding a blood-red saber in its hands, it seemed to have transformed into a Shura as it strode towards the three Dharma Dao Jun. Shu! On the other side, Tao Lord Immortal Sword seized the opportunity to channel his essence spirit. Dermic power surged within his body and he vanished, transforming into a sword beam that sped into the distance. Sword escape. Tao Lord Immortal Sword and Qin Pianran's heaven and earth Dharma characteristics were destroyed by Hakua Dojin, and could not be condensed yet. When Tao Lord Immortal Sword saw that the situation was amiss, he fled immediately. Before he left, he did not even inform Qin Pianran. Trying to escape? Yin Baichen sneered. The Shura-dermic body chased after Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the other two. However, he himself moved and raised the Shura saber in his hands, slashing forward. Swash! A gigantic blood-colored saber shadow descended from the skies and tore through the void, as though it wanted to slice the world into two. Instantly, it caught up to the sword beam in the distance and slashed down viciously. Although Yin Baichen was attacking Tao Lord Breaking Skies and the others, in reality, half of his attention was focused on Tao Lord Immortal Sword. Tao Lord Immortal Sword was definitely someone he had to kill. This person was vengeful and suffered great humiliation in 100 Refinement sect. He hated Su Zimo to the core, and would definitely cause trouble in the future if he was allowed to leave. The reason why Yin Baichen came today was to end everything. Senior brother, watch out! Right then, just as the blood-colored saber shadow was about to slash Tao Lord Immortal Sword, a beautiful figure wielded the sword in her hands and blocked it. Clang! The saber and sword collided and sparks flew. Qin Pianran's body shuddered and she could not hold onto her sword any longer. It flew out of her hands and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face turned pale as she fell from midair. She was severely injured with a single slash from the Shura. The moment she fell from midair, Qin Pianran knew that she would definitely die today, and there was no way she could escape. Qin Pianran tried her best to turn back, wanting to take one last look at Tao Lord Immortal Sword. As long as she could take one last look at her senior brother, she would be satisfied and die without regrets. But when she turned her head to look, her heart gradually turned cold and sank to the bottom of the valley. That sword light had long since disappeared into the distance. It did not pause for her, not even for a moment. The person who said that he would not let her down did not even turn back to look at her. All she saw was a streak of sword light disappearing into the horizon. Chapter 984. Thump. Qin Pianran fell heavily to the ground and aggravated his injuries. His tendons and bones felt like they were about to fall apart. However, it was as though she could not feel anything and was already numb. How could the pain on her body compare to the pain in her heart right now? She was still trying her best to support her upper body. Her beautiful eyes did not blink as she stared blankly at the disappearing sword beam in the distance. There was a hint of indignance, disappointment, pain and struggle in her eyes in the end. All her emotions vanished and her expression was numb. The light in her beautiful eyes gradually dimmed, becoming empty and lifeless. When he saw that, Su Zimo sighed internally. The truly heartless one was not Shura, but Tao Lord Immortal's sword who had left. Including the battle at 100 Refinement Sect, Qin Pianran had saved Tao Lord Immortal's sword twice. Even without their many years of relationship as fellow disciples and even if Tao Lord Immortal's sword had no feelings for Qin Pianran, the two lifesavers were enough for him to stop in his tracks and save Qin Pianran at all costs. However, Tao Lord Immortal's sword did not. He only left Qin Pianran with a cold sword beam and a cold back view. The irony was that Shura was someone of the Fiend sex while Tao Lord Immortal's sword was someone of the Immortal sections. Who was the Immortal and who was the Fiend? Yan Beichen failed to slash Tao Lord Immortal's sword and wanted to give chase. However, he stopped after taking a few steps. He had already pushed his sword escape technique to its limits. Given his movement technique, it was almost impossible for him to catch up. At the same time, on the other side of the battlefield, Shura's dharmic body had already sliced the 3 heaven and earth dharma characteristics into 2 and strode forward in hot pursuit. Bang! 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 Wherever Shura's dharmic body passed, the ground quaked. Shura's dharmic body was more than 80 feet tall and had huge strides. In a few steps it caught up to Monk Kong-won. He swung his blood saber. Poof! The next moment, a shiny bald head flew up. The moment the essence spirit escaped, it was knocked into Shura's dharmic body and turned into nothingness. Monk Kong-won was dead. Bang! Boom! Shura's dharmakaya took another 2 steps forward and caught up with another person. Then he slashed down with his blood blade. Tao Lord Fire Cloud summoned his Destiny dharmic weapon and roared, wanting to defend. However, in front of the murderous Shura's dharmic body that was more than 80 feet tall, Tao Lord Fire Cloud was as insignificant as an ant. His actions were akin to a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Boom! Both sides collided, resulting in a loud explosion. A terrifying power surged into Tao Lord Fire Cloud's body and caused his body to explode. His essence spirit was shattered and destroyed on the spot. Shura's dharmic body strode forward with surging blood chi and soon caught up to the last person, Heavenly Dipper Sex Tao Lord Breaking Skies. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, Tao Lord Breaking Skies turned around and faced Shura's avatar head-on. Boom! 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 Without their heaven and earth dharma characteristics, their dharmic arts and blood chi could not defend against the killing power of Shura's dharmic body. After a series of collisions, Tao Lord Breaking Skies was covered in injuries as well. His expression was dispirited and his eyes were filled with endless indignation as he roared, "Shura, why? Why do you want to kill us?" Yan Beichen's expression was cold and he did not say anything. He could not be bothered with him. Exclamation point. Before long, Tao Lord Breaking Skies was sliced into 2 by Shura's dharmic body. He died in a tragic manner and his essence spirit was destroyed. It was only at that moment that Yan Beichen revealed a hint of fatigue. This battle had consumed a lot of his energy, mental state and dharmic powers. After the battle, Shura's dharmic body was riddled with holes as well. It only gradually dissipated after he put away the storage bags and destiny dharmic weapons left behind by the Tao Lords. Yan Beichen took out a handful of elixirs and stuffed them into his mouth. After regulating his breathing for a while, his expression relaxed and his face flushed red. Su Zimo revealed himself and walked forward. "Thank you, Senior." Su Zimo arrived before Yan Beichen and bowed deeply. Yan Beichen was not surprised when he saw Su Zimo appear. Given his cultivation, he had long sensed that someone was lurking nearby. "It's fine." Yan Beichen patted Su Zimo on the shoulder and said indifferently, "You came from Misty Peak as well." Since you came to the Middle Continent, you don't have anyone to rely on. I can't let these Dharma Daojun bully you. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he was touched. Senior, your injuries. Just now, Su Zimo noticed that Yan Beichen seemed to have suffered serious injuries after fighting against the 5 Dharma Daojun essence spirits. They're all minor injuries. It's nothing. Yan Beichen waved his hand and said casually, seemingly unbothered. Pausing for a moment, Yan Beichen shifted his gaze and saw Qin Pianran lying not far away. He frowned and said, she heard that. She can't be left alive. With that said, Yan Beichen spun the Shura saber in his hand and wanted to kill Qin Pianran on the spot. There's no need for that, Su Zimo shook his head. I understand your intentions, Senior. This time round, the news of Yan Beichen killing Dao Lord Immortal Sword and the others would spread throughout the cultivation world before long. The reason why he did not acknowledge Su Zimo in 100 Refinement Sect was because he did not want to implicate Su Zimo because of this matter and cause trouble for Su Zimo. The reason why he wanted to kill Qin Pianran was to silence him. Su Zimo said, Senior, I've already caused enough trouble. I really don't care about 1 or 2 more. Even if this doesn't happen, what will come will still come. Yan Beichen shook his head. Right now you're a disciple of Extreme Fire and I'm the Shura of the Fiend sections. Immortals and fiends cannot coexist. Furthermore, I have many enemies. It won't be good for you if you get too close to me. Ha 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 ha. When he heard that, Su Zimo laughed instead and said loudly, Senior, I'm now known as a fiend demon by the world. What's there to be afraid of if I'm close to someone from the fiend sex? Su Zimo was filled with heroism. Senior, I Su Zimo will remember your help today. Even if you make the entire world your enemy one day, I'm willing to fight alongside you, let alone the fact that you have many enemies. His words were extremely bold and even Yan Beichen was moved and emotional when he heard that. Alright. Yan Beichen was also an unrestrained and carefree person as he said, since that's the case, you don't have to call me Senior anymore. I'm a person who hates *T etiquette and rules the most. I'm slightly older than you. In the future, we can just address each other as brothers. Su Zimo's blood surged and he wanted to agree immediately. However, he hesitated for a moment and said, my cultivation is too low. Throughout history, there was no lack of cultivators who became sworn brothers in the cultivation world. However, the difference in cultivation between those cultivators would not be too great. For example, Yan Beichen and Su Zimo, one was Jining Jinjuan and the other was Dharma Daojun. Yan Beichen was more than qualified to be Su Zimo's master. It was truly unprecedented for these 2 cultivation realms to address each other as brothers. Humph. Yan Beichen was somewhat displeased and said, Brother Su, what are you saying? I, Yan Beichen, never look at cultivation realm when addressing others as brothers. Even if you're immortal, so what if you're Jining Jinjuan? Su Zimo no longer hesitated and cupped his fists with a smile. Brother Yan. Brother Su. Yan Beichen called out with a hint of warmth in his cold eyes. The 2 of them smiled at each other. Chapter 985. Ha! Qin Pianran laid on the ground covered in dust. Her face was pale and her eyes were empty. Suddenly, she laughed with an indifferent expression. Su Zimo and Qin Chao looked over. A look of mockery flashed through Qin Pianran's eyes as she said mockingly, a fiend demon that kills without batting an eyelid and a cold-blooded fiend are calling each other brothers here. Truly birds of a feather flock together and are a perfect match. Su Zimo shook his head and chuckled. He could not be bothered. Unexpectedly, Yan Beichen did not kill her. He only said calmly, Brother Su, let's go. This person is already dead. She's just a walking corpse. Su Zimo understood what Yan Beichen meant. Qin Pianran was also a pitiful person. Although she was still alive, she had suffered such a blow and her heart was already dead. She was no different from a dead person. Su Zimo and Qin Chao had just turned around and were about to leave when Qin Pianran suddenly became a little crazy. She supported her body with her arms and dragged herself in the mud. She shouted at the top of her lungs, You are Shura. You are bloodthirsty. Why don't you kill me? Just kill me. Yan Beichen did not even turn around. He smirked and said with a hint of mockery, I Shura. Kill all the people in the world who deserve to be killed. Some people are unscrupulous in order to survive. They deserve to be killed. But some people are determined to die. I won't kill them. Suzimo sighed softly. Not only Shura but he also felt it. Suzimo knew from Qin Pianran's initial sneer that Qin Pianran wanted to die. Qin Pianran had provoked him time and time again. Even if it were someone from an immortal sect, it would be reasonable to kill her. But Shura did not. I know you don't dare to. And you are a coward. Qin Pianran suddenly burst out laughing. His voice was already hoarse as he said, You must be afraid that senior brother Immortal Sword will take revenge after killing me, right? Yen Beichen turned around and looked at Qin Pianran, who was covered in mud and had a pale face. He sneered, Stupid woman, do you really think that the Immortal Sword will come to me for revenge because of you? That must be it, that must be it. Yen Beichen's words were meant to be sarcastic, but when Qin Pianran heard it, he seemed to have found an answer. His originally dead eyes lit up. Suzimo revealed a look of pity. Qin Pianran was infatuated with Tao Lord Immortal Sword. However, that infatuation was heart-wrenching. Time is fleeting and youth is fleeting. Whether it was a woman in the mortal world or a female cultivator in the cultivation world, the greatest misfortune in her life was to give herself to the wrong person. Qin Pianran said loudly, I know. Senior brother Immortal Sword did not abandon me. He went to look for help. He will definitely make a comeback. Yes, that must be it. That must be it. As though to confirm that thought, Qin Pianran gripped his fists and repeated softly to emphasize it. Yen Beichen looked at the woman before him who was on the verge of madness and sneered internally before turning to leave. However, the moment he turned around he seemed to have thought of something and stopped in his tracks. Since that's the case, I'll make you give up. Yen Beichen said coldly. I'll open up a cave abode nearby and stay there for the time being. Let's see if that Immortal Sword dares to return. If he does, I'll kill him. With that said, Yen Beichen turned to Suzimo and asked, If you're free, come along as well. I have some cultivation insights that I can share with you. Alright, Suzimo nodded in agreement. This place was not far from 100 Refinement Sect. If anything happened, he could rush to 100 Refinement Sect to deliver the news. Yen Beichen's gaze shifted to a mountain peak not far away. Without saying a word, he waved his sleeves and swept up Qin Pianran on the ground, speeding towards the mountain peak. Suzimo sent out a messenger spirit crane to 100 Refinement Sect to inform Tao Lord Scarlet Star, and the others that he was fine before chasing after Yen Beichen. The three of them arrived before the mountain peak before long. Yen Beichen waved his Shura saber and casually slashed the mountain peak a few times. As though he was cutting tofu, huge rocks fell one after another. A moment later, a simple cave abode was created. The three of them entered. Azura casually tossed Qin Pianran to the side and didn't even spare her a glance. He sat down cross-legged and started to heal himself. Suzimo began to set up some simple array formations at the entrance of the cave. The location of this cave abode was extremely good. Standing here, one's field of vision was extremely wide, and one could see everything that was happening outside. If Tao Lord Immortal Sword were to make a comeback, they would definitely be discovered immediately. In the following period of time, Yen Beichen would spend most of the day cultivating to heal his injuries. For the rest of the day, he would explain some of his cultivation insights to Suzimo without holding back. Both of them cultivated the saber and Yen Beichen had even imparted the secret skills of the fiend sex to Suzimo. At that time, Suzimo's cultivation realm was not high enough and there were some things that he could not understand. Shura's saber intent was not cultivated as well. At that moment, after Yen Beichen's explanation, many of his doubts were resolved and he felt enlightened. As time passed by, Yen Beichen's injuries gradually improved. However, his complexion was still somewhat pale. Each time Suzimo asked, Yen Beichen would reply casually that it was fine and deal with it. For the past few days, Qin Pianran had been guarding the entrance of the cave. She leaned against the wall and looked into the distance in anticipation, not sleeping at all. She did not even heal her injuries. She was afraid that she would miss Tao Lord Immortal Sword's return while she was healing. Day after day, 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Over the past few days, many cultivators passed by this place. However, almost all of them were below the Dharma characteristic realm and void reversions were rare, let alone Tao Lord Immortal Sword. 10 days was enough for Tao Lord Immortal Sword to find helpers and make a comeback. After 10 days of sleepless nights, Qin Pianran looked exhausted and her face was yellow. However, she did not give up. However, with each passing day, the light in his eyes dimmed a bit. A month later, that pair of eyes had become dull and lifeless. Su Zimo looked at the woman before him, and almost did not dare to recognize her. Initially, she was a flawless and heroic sword sect cultivator. Now, her face was yellow and her hair was unkempt while her body was covered in dust. She could not even compare to a peasant woman in the fields, let alone an ethereal cultivator. For the past few days, she had not even washed or groomed herself. A woman would doll herself up for her lover. She had given up on that person. Therefore, she did not care about her appearance at all. So what if she was ugly or beautiful? For the past month, Qin Pianran did not heal her injuries. Coupled with the fact that she did not sleep or rest, her injuries worsened and worsened. The wounds on her body were already rotting and emitting a foul stench. However, she was oblivious to it and merely leaned against the entrance of the cave, looking into the distance with lifeless eyes as the life force in her body drained slowly. There were no tears in her eyes. There was nothing sadder than a dead heart. Chapter 986. Have you given up? This was the first time in a month that Yan Beichen spoke to Qin Pianran. It sounded cold and heartless. However, Su Zimo knew that Yan Beichen was trying to save her. If Yan Beichen was truly cold-blooded and heartless, there was no need for him to do anything. All he had to do was throw Qin Pianran aside and leave her to fend for herself. Qin Pianran would definitely not be able to last long. There was no need for him to go through so much trouble to dig out a cave abode here and wait for a month. Qin Pianran's expression was blank as she opened her mouth slightly, as though she wanted to say something. However, her throat was already dry and she could only make hoarse sounds. Her lips were already dry and cracked. That slight action caused her lips to split open and flow with scarlet blood. Qin Pianran pursed her lips and drank her blood. As though her throat had recovered a little, she murmured softly, "He doesn't know where I am. It's only normal that he hasn't returned." Su Zimo did not believe that reason. Even Qin Pianran herself did not believe it. Because when she said this, there was not the slightest ripple or luster in her eyes, only a deathly stillness. If this was a month ago, Yan Beichen would have sneered and called her a stupid woman. However, at that moment Yan Beichen did not laugh. He merely looked at Qin Pianran calmly. 20 days ago, I went out once and released the news that you were in my hands. Qin Pianran's heart ached. The last bit of hope in her heart was shattered mercilessly by Yan Beichen's words. A month had passed and no one came. Even though Shura released the news of her, no one came. Right then, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard from outside the cave abode. More than 10 cultivators were passing by and speeding into the distance. Among those cultivators, the leaders were 2 void reversions, one fat and one skinny. Among the remaining cultivators were Jinying Jinjuan and Taoist Master Jin Dan. The formation Su Zimo had set up at the entrance of the cave was quite magical. It was difficult for the cultivators outside to discover this cave, but the people inside could see the situation outside clearly. It's been an eventful period recently. One major event after another. The fat Taoist in the lead sighed and said, "During the 1,000 Crane Tea Party, that monster Su Zimo returned and started a massacre. Then, the various great Tao lords rushed to the 100 Refinement sect to ask for him. I didn't expect Hake Dojin to appear. He's an expert from 5,000 years ago." What happened next? One of the cultivators asked curiously. The skinny Taoist said, "The Tao lords were rebuffed and could only retreat. In the end, he bumped into the titular disciple of the Shura sect, Tao Lord Shura." "Who is that Shura?" "He's a cold-blooded, ruthless and bloodthirsty demon. This battle is really tragic." Why did Shura seek out Tao Monarch Immortal Sword and the others? Who knows? Shura is a lunatic. No one knows what he's thinking. Perhaps he just entered the Dharma characteristic realm, and is looking for someone to test his saber. I heard that Shura has some sort of relationship with Su Zimo. The reason why he killed Tao Lord Immortal Sword, and the others this time round, is for Su Zimo. The cultivators discussed excitedly. The skinny Taoist pursed his lips and his gaze shifted. He paused and pointed not far away. It said that the battle broke out over there. How tragic. I heard that only 2 of the 9 Tao Lord Immortal Sword survived. Which 2? Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Tao Lord Immortal Sword. Both of them are titular disciples. That's not right. I heard a while ago that a female cultivator named Dharma Daojun from Sword Sect called Qin Pianran is alive as well and was captured by Shura. A cultivator said in confusion. The skinny Taoist shook his head. Can she still be alive after being captured by Shura? I don't think so. The fat Taoist laughed strangely. That female cultivator must be quite good-looking. Otherwise, why would Shura capture her and not kill her directly? I heard that Shura brought that woman along to force Tao Lord Immortal Sword to appear. However, he ignored them completely, the skinny Taoist said. That's for sure. If it was me, I wouldn't appear either, the fat Taoist said. Who would be willing to provoke that lunatic Shura for a woman? Furthermore, that woman is probably already a withered flower in Shura's hands. There's even less reason for Tao Lord Immortal Sword to appear for such a woman. Silence filled the cave abode when they heard the voices outside. Qin Pianran's body trembled slightly and her eyes were dark. Her sharp nails had already pierced through her palms and fresh blood was flowing, but she did not realize it at all. Qin Pianran spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted, unable to hold on any longer. She was already severely injured to begin with. For the past month, she had not slept or recuperated and her body and mind were already at their limits. Right now, she was only hanging on by a breath of air and relying on an illusory fantasy. However, when she heard the discussions outside the cave abode, Qin Pianran's thoughts collapsed instantly. She was disheartened and fainted on the spot in her anxiety. Yan Beichen was expressionless, but a cold glint flashed through his eyes. The temperature in the cave abode suddenly turned cold and sinister. Su Zimo knew that the group of cultivators outside had already triggered Yan Beichen's killing intent. Yan Beichen stood up slowly and walked out of the cave abode. Right then, the few cultivators outside changed the topic and discussed something else, causing Yan Beichen to stop in his tracks. By the way, have you guys heard? At the Thousand Crane Tea Party, Su Zimo declared war on Diin. A few days ago, Diin accepted the challenge. I heard that the time is a month later and the location of the battle is the Dao Inheritance Ground. However, we haven't heard Su Zimo's reply for the past few days. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and his eyes lit up. Diin accepted the challenge. Initially, he was worried that if Diin was timid and ignored his declaration of war, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to kill Diin. Now that Diin had accepted the challenge, that was for the best. However, what was the Dao Inheritance Ground that the cultivators outside were talking about? Seemed to be very famous. Su Zimo had just arrived in the Middle Continent and did not know much about the various places in the Middle Continent. He had only heard of the Dao Inheritance Ground. At the side, Yan Beichen frowned instinctively when he heard the words Dao Inheritance Ground. Not only is Diin a monster incarnate, he's also a formidable character. That's right, that move of his is truly perfect. By setting the location of the battle at the Dao Inheritance Ground, Su Zimo's advantage is gone. Now, it's up to Su Zimo to deal with it. What else can he do? He can only admit defeat. That's right. I heard that he has just cultivated to the perfected nascent soul realm and there's a major cultivation realm difference between them. If he enters the Dao Inheritance Ground, he has no chance of winning against Diin and will definitely die. Fufu, he took the initiative to declare war. If he doesn't go when the time comes, his reputation will definitely suffer a huge blow. What should we do then? It's better than going to the Dao Inheritance Ground to die, right? The more Su Zimo listened, the more confused he became. To the cultivators outside, this Dao Inheritance Ground seemed like a tiger's den that was filled with danger. However, it did not seem to affect Diin at all. The cultivators discussed and gradually left. Yan Beichen glanced sideways, as though he could see the confusion in Su Zimo's heart. I'll go out for a while. It'll be quick. I'll talk to you about this when I return. With that said, Yan Beichen walked out of the cave abode in a flash. Chapter 987. Not far away. A few tragic cries sounded and peace was restored before long. Before long, Yan Beichen returned with a faint blood aura. Yan Beichen went straight to the point and asked, "How much do you know about the Dao inheritance ground?" "Nothing. I've never heard of it." Su Zimo shook his head. Yan Beichen said, "That's normal. The strength of Misty Peak hasn't reached the level where they can come into contact with the Dao inheritance ground. As for you, no one probably mentioned it to you when you first arrived in the Middle Continent and entered 100 Refinement Sect. The Dao inheritance ground is not somewhere in the Middle Continent. Instead, it's a space created by many ancient mighty figures." Su Zimo nodded. In the ancient era, the rise of the human race produced countless paragons and monster incarnates. However, there weren't that many sects and factions. Some ancient mighty figures failed to break through to the Mahayana realm or something happened. They would choose to leave their Dao techniques there and wait for the fated person. Pausing for a moment, Yan Beichen asked, "Do you know why there's a word, Dao, in the title of Void Reversion and Dharma Characteristic Cultivators?" In the world of cultivation, there was a corresponding title for every major realm of cultivator. For example, Jin Dan realm cultivators were known as perfected beings. Nascent soul realm cultivators were known as perfected lords. This was also a symbol of status. Most of the time, one might not be able to tell the other party's cultivation realm due to their abilities. Or, it would be rude to rashly check on the other party's cultivation. However, as long as one heard the other party's name as perfected lord, they would have an answer. The other party was a nascent soul realm cultivator. As for void reversions, they were known as Taoists. Dharma characteristic realm cultivators were known as Dao lords. Su Zimo truly did not know why there was a word Dao in those two titles. When he saw Su Zimo shake his head, Yan Beichen continued, "That's because generally speaking, when you cultivate to this realm, you should clarify your Dao heart." Dao heart. Su Zimo was slightly taken aback, revealing a pondering expression. Yan Beichen's voice sounded again, "There are millions of cultivators, and each of them has a different Dao heart. Some want to deliver all living beings from torment, some want to slay demons and devils, some want to be free and unfettered, some want to live forever, some want to become powerful, some want to take revenge. Make your Dao heart clear and not be shaken by external things. You can't be refined by fire, drowned by water, crushed by the heavens and buried by the earth. Only by being firm like a boulder and immovable like a mountain can you cultivate the grand Dao." The Dao heart was the purpose of cultivation. Why did he cultivate? Cultivation was an act that defied the heavens, and there were countless difficulties and obstacles on the path. Only by constantly guarding one's Dao heart would one be able to arrive at the other side. Yan Beichen's eyes shone with a sharp light as they fell on Su Zimo's face. He asked faintly, "Why do you cultivate?" Su Zimo was in a daze as he recalled the scene of him being bullied by perfected being Song Lang in Pingyang town. He recalled the scene of Zhui Feng turning into ashes in order to save him. He recalled the scene where peach blossoms fell from the peach blossom tree, and a woman in blood-colored robes imparted him a cultivation technique before stepping into the path of cultivation. Everything felt like it was yesterday. Su Zimo murmured softly, "I don't have a spirit root. When I first started cultivating, I merely wanted to fight against fate and change my own fate." The scene before him changed. Su Zimo saw his elder brother, Su Hong, who was gradually aging. He saw the ruins and bones of Yan country. He saw the mortals who could not resist at all under the trampling of cultivators and demon beasts in the flames of war. He saw the tear-stained faces of all living beings in the world and their helpless eyes. Gradually, Su Zimo's gaze turned resolute as he said slowly, "Right now, I'm not cultivating to change my own fate. I want to change the fates of all living beings in the world. I want to establish a Dao. A Dao that's different from immortals, Buddhas and fiends. A Dao that can be cultivated without a spirit root. That's my Dao heart." Yan Beichen looked at Su Zimo for a long time without saying anything. Even with his temperament, he could not help but reveal a hint of shock in his eyes at this moment. Initially, he was merely asking casually. However, he did not expect Su Zimo's answer to be so shocking that even he was shocked. There was nothing much to say about establishing a Tao heart. It could not be said that a Tao heart that delivered all living beings from torment was good while a Tao heart that was carefree was bad. However, there were still differences in Tao hearts. For example, some cultivators had a Tao heart that was for revenge and were less magnanimous. After a cultivator took revenge, they would definitely encounter a bottleneck in their cultivation and feel lost. However, most cultivators had a Tao heart that was for longevity. If they wanted longevity, they had to cultivate and break through continuously. There was no end to the path of longevity. Compared to revenge, the Tao heart for longevity was much more magnanimous. However, Su Zimo's Tao heart, structure and magnanimity were countless times higher than things like longevity and slaying demons and fiends. He wanted to change the fates of all living beings in the world. How magnanimous was that? How magnanimous was that? How bold was that? Good. Yen Beichen snapped out of his trance and nodded. Zimo, I'm inferior to you in this aspect. Su Zimo was probably the only person in this world who could make Shura bow his head. Yen Beichen said, the legacy left behind by an ancient mighty figure requires cultivators to enter the inheritance ground and establish a Tao heart before they can be recognized. That will depend on their opportunities. Su Zimo nodded and had a rough understanding of the Tao inheritance ground. The Tao inheritance ground was not only a place where many ancient mighty figures left behind their legacies, it was also a place where many cultivators established their Tao hearts. After establishing their Tao hearts, every cultivator could have their own Tao title. This inheritance ground has been passed down since the ancient era. The Tao techniques within are still around? Su Zimo was surprised. Of course, Yen Beichen explained. How many conjoint body mighty figures have appeared since the ancient era? Apart from the legacies left behind by ancient mighty figures, there will be mighty figures entering the inheritance ground every generation to leave behind their legacies. Furthermore, the truly top-notch Tao technique legacies inside are extremely rare and have strict requirements for one's Tao heart. Not everyone is qualified to inherit them. Top-notch Tao technique legacies? Su Zimo asked. Yen Beichen said, in the inheritance ground, the legacies left behind by many mighty figures are all sorts of strange things. It could be a weapon, a boulder, or a statue. However, legend has it that the strongest dozens of mighty figures of the ancient era left their legacies in a unique region. This region is in the center of the Tao inheritance ground and is called the Three Tribulations domain. As the name suggests, there are three major tribulations in the Three Tribulations domain. The first is the Wind Tribulation, the second is the Fire Tribulation, and the third is the Thunder Tribulation. Only by resisting the Three Tribulations can one reach the center of the Three Tribulations domain and see the legacies left behind by the dozens of ancient mighty figures. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he asked, Brother Yen, I'm sure you entered the Tao inheritance ground back then and cleared the Three Tribulations domain. Did you reach the innermost part? No, Yen Beichen shook his head. I only cleared the Wind and Fire Tribulations and almost died in the Thunder Tribulation. Chapter 988. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. Even with Yen Beichen's temperament and strength, he had merely transcended the Wind and Fire Tribulations. It was clear how terrifying the Three Tribulations were. Su Zimo frowned and asked, Will I really die if I fail to transcend the tribulations? Yes, Yen Beichen had a grim expression. It's fine if you can withdraw in time. If you forcefully transcend the tribulations, your Tao heart will collapse and you will be delirious. In serious cases, your essence spirit will be destroyed and you will die. This Three Tribulations domain is the only dangerous place in the Tao inheritance ground. When he heard that, Su Zimo was puzzled and could not help but ask, in that case, the Tao inheritance ground isn't some dangerous place. Just now, those people are discussing as though I'll be in danger if I enter? You're fighting a peerless monster incarnate like Di'in who's a major cultivation realm above you. Isn't that dangerous? Yen Beichen asked instead. If it's a fair fight, there's nothing to fear from Di'in. Su Zimo's gaze was cold and he said with a murderous aura. He had many trump cards. Apart from top-tier cultivation techniques such as the immortal and Buddhist cultivation techniques, he also had a supreme secret manual of the Tao of Fire. the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra. Of course, Su Zimo's greatest trump card was the fusion of his two essence spirits and the dragonification of his physical body. At that time, his combat strength would increase exponentially, and he would have an 80% chance of killing Diin even if he was against the Void Reversion realm. That's the problem. Yan Beichen shook his head. This battle is not fair at all. The Dao Inheritance Ground is a space created by many ancient mighty figures, and can be considered as a sacred ground of the human race. If a demon were to enter it, although they would not be killed, their bloodline and nascent divinity would be suppressed. In other words, all the methods of the demon race cannot be used. When he heard that, Su Zimo finally understood. The reason why Diin set the location of the battle in the Dao Inheritance Ground was to restrict his demon methods. After entering the Dao Inheritance Ground, Diin would not be affected at all. However, his combat strength would be reduced by half. Yan Beichen asked, "How confident are you of killing Diin after losing your demonic techniques?" Su Zimo was silent. In all fairness, if he didn't have the monster clan's methods to rely on, he had no confidence in winning this battle. In other words, the possibility of him losing was extremely high. Even his physical body, which he relied on the most, might not be able to suppress Diin if he could not use his bloodline. As for dermic powers and primordial spirit, he was at a disadvantage. After all, they were a major cultivation realm apart. Furthermore, Diin was a top-tier existence even among titular disciples. Although Diin had accepted the challenge, the choice of location left Su Zimo in a completely passive position. "I don't recommend you accept the challenge," Yan Beichen said. "As long as one is a conjoint body mighty figure, they can enter the Dao Inheritance Ground at any time. The inheritance inside will always be there. You don't have to rush. However, if you enter this time round, you'll definitely face Diin. Your chances of winning this battle aren't high." Su Zimo knew that Yan Beichen was already being polite when he said that his chances of winning were not high. In the eyes of others, he had no chance of winning this battle. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, "If I can advance to the Void Reversion realm, even if I'm only at early stage and don't have any demonic techniques, I'll be able to fight him." Once he advanced to the Void Reversion realm, the power of the black-haired essence spirit would increase exponentially. His dermic powers would increase as well. Furthermore, he would be able to use even more trump cards and would definitely not be disadvantaged against Diin. "However, you're not at the Void Reversion realm after all," Yan Beichen said. "You've only broken through to perfected nascent soul for more than a month. If you want to advance further and break through to the Void Reversion realm, you'll need dozens of years at the fastest. That's if everything goes smoothly for you. If you encounter a bottleneck, there are countless paragons who are stuck at the nascent soul realm for hundreds of years." Su Zimo knew that Yan Beichen was not lying. After all, the breakthrough from the nascent soul realm to the Void Reversion realm was even more difficult. Most of the time, without any opportunities, it was possible for one to not advance for hundreds of years just by cultivating in seclusion. Yan Beichen continued, "Diin is very smart. He didn't give you too much time. A month later, you'll have a life and death battle in the Dao Inheritance Ground. It's impossible for you to break through to the Void Reversion realm in a month." A month passed in the blink of an eye, and breaking through to the Void Reversion realm was practically a fantasy. If Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he was about to speak, Yan Beichen read his thoughts instantly and shook his head. "It's even more impossible for you to break through to the Void Reversion realm in the Dao Inheritance Ground. The Dao Inheritance Ground is isolated from the outside world, and you won't be able to comprehend heaven and earth at all. It's a ruin inside, and the spirit chi is thin. There's not enough energy for you to absorb either. Ever since the ancient era, not a single cultivator has broken through in the Dao Inheritance Ground. Everyone enters and leaves immediately after obtaining the inheritance. They won't stay inside for long." Su Zimo fell silent. "No one will laugh at you even if you don't go for this battle," Yan Beichen said. "All the cultivators can tell that Diin is wary of your demon methods. Even if you're a major cultivation realm apart, he won't dare to fight you. However, if you accept the challenge, you'll be falling into his trap." Su Zimo suddenly asked, "Brother Yan, if it were you, would you accept the challenge?" After a moment of silence, Yan Beichen suddenly smiled and nodded. Yes. Su Zimo smiled as well. To a certain extent they were similar. Yan Beichen came to help Su Zimo this time round and faced top Dharma characteristic cultivators such as Tao Lord Immortal Sword and Tao Lord Cloud Rain. This trip was also a risky one. However, he still came. Su Zimo did not declare war on Di Yin for himself this time round. Di Yin's existence could not threaten him. Di Yin was threatening the friends around him. Di Yin nearly killed little Fatty and Jichuntan. That was something that Su Zimo could not tolerate. The reason why he declared war on Di Yin was because he wanted to eliminate these dangers completely. If he missed this opportunity, Su Zimo did not know how long he would have to wait for the next one. Therefore, he had to accept the challenge and do his best to kill Di Yin in the Tao inheritance ground. Furthermore, this battle was initiated by Su Zimo. If he avoided the battle at that moment, it would have a huge impact on his Tao heart, and it would definitely become his greatest mental demon in the future. His Tao was to be fearless. Yan Beichen sighed gently. What a pity. If I had entered the Dharma characteristic realm a step later, I might have been able to enter the Tao inheritance ground and help you. The Tao inheritance ground only allowed nascent soul and void reversion cultivators to enter. Even Dharma characteristic and conjoint body cultivators were not allowed. Brother Yan, you've already helped me enough. Su Zimo chuckled. Boom! Right then, a loud bang sounded from afar and the ground shook. A terrifying aura burst forth and surged into the horizons, forming a gigantic pillar of fire that burned the clouds in the firmaments red. The auspicious clouds were set ablaze and the skies were filled with multicolored light. An enormous pressure spread out, and everything fell silent. Hakya Dojin has broken through. Yan Beichen looked into the distance and murmured softly. This is a good thing for you. Extreme Fire is your master. Go and take a look at him. Yan Beichen added. Alright, I'll be right back. Su Zimo wanted to see Hakya Dojin as well and congratulated his master. After bidding farewell to Yan Beichen, he sped off. Chapter 989. Su Zimo sprinted the entire way and arrived at 100 Refinement Sect before long. Uncle Master, you're finally back. Before long, he saw Tao Lord Scarlet Star running over. When he saw Su Zimo, he seemed to be relieved. Grandmaster Extreme Fire has just broken through to the conjoint body realm and was looking for you. Tao Lord Scarlet Star brought Su Zimo to the main hall of 100 Refinement Sect before long. The hall was spacious and bright. Some of the 100 Refinement Sect experts who were guarding Hakya Dojin's breakthrough had just dispersed. Right now, there were not many people left in the hall. Apart from Hakya Dojin and a few other 100 Refinement Sect cultivators, there was also Shangguanzi of Chiguramon, Elder Gu of Ancient Array Sect and Elder Gu of Elixir Yang Sect. Su Zimo entered the hall and was shocked when he saw Hakya Dojin. Hakya Dojin did not seem to have changed much. However, as he stood there, he was like a huge furnace that was burning fiercely. He had merged with the entire world, giving others a feeling that he was unshakable. Even the strongest supreme Dharma characteristic could only control 90% of the heaven and earth powers. However, Hakya Dojin, who had broken through to the conjoint body realm, was heaven and earth just by standing there. Zimo, come and sit here. When Hakya Dojin caught sight of Su Zimo, he waved with a gentle gaze. Su Zimo walked forward and sat in the middle of a group of Dharma Daojun and conjoint body mighty figures with a calm expression. Hakya Dojin asked, Do you know that Di Yin asked you to accept the challenge at the Tao inheritance ground? I do. Su Zimo nodded. What are your plans? Hakya Dojin asked. Accept the challenge. Su Zimo did not hide his thoughts and merely said those two words in a firm tone. Hakya Dojin's expression did not change. In the entire cultivation world, he was probably the only person who knew Su Zimo the best. He was not surprised by this answer. Child, how much do you know about the Tao inheritance ground? Shangguanzi, who was at the side, liked Su Zimo and asked gently. I know a little. Su Zimo said. The human race's land of inheritance. In there, I can't use any of my demonic means. Without the demon clan's methods, how confident are you of winning against Di Yin, when there is a difference of a major realm between you and him? Elder Gu asked. Su Zimo said honestly, I have no confidence. Even so, you still want to go? Elder Gu frowned. I have to go. Su Zimo's tone was firm. Don't be in such a hurry to make a decision. I just received some news. Listen to it. Hake Dojin said slowly. Apart from Diin, Dao being Heavenly Dipper, Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Monk Formless will enter the Dao inheritance ground as well. A cold light flashed in Su Zimo's eyes. Just by hearing the names of the 3 cultivators, he could deduce that they were the 3 titular disciples of Heavenly Dipper Sect, Zephyr Thunder Palace and Formless Monastery. The reason why the 3 titular disciples were rushing to enter the Dao inheritance ground at this moment was self-evident. Perfected Lord Panglan of Heavenly Dipper Sect died in the hands of Su Zimo at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. Zephyr Thunder Palace had always wanted to obtain Su Zimo's Purple Thunder Manual. As for Formless Monastery, their goal should be to create inheritances such as Qinglian and the Daming True Sutra. Su Zimo might not be able to win against Diin alone. Furthermore, there were 3 more titular disciples now. Hake Dojin said. Every sect only has a single titular disciple. There's no need to talk about the strength of that disciple. Even if the 3 of them are weaker than Diin, they won't be that much weaker. Elder Gu nodded as well. That's right. Titular disciples are the face of the major sections. Almost all of them can only groom one after spending 1,000 years or even thousands of years of resources. Su Zimo went on a killing spree at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. Even against the encirclement of 8 void reversions, he was able to suppress the 8 of them domineeringly. What he relied on was the burst power of his dragonification after fusing with the scarlet-haired Een spirit. If he could not use the scarlet-haired Een spirit, channel his bloodline or transform into a dragon, given his current combat strength, it would be difficult to predict the outcome of any titular disciple. When he saw that Su Zimo was silent, Elder Gu said, You might not know about the 3 titular disciples since you've just arrived in the Middle Continent. All 3 of them were once ranked at the top of the phenomenon ranking, and have never tasted defeat against anyone of the same cultivation realm. The 3 of them have been famous for a long time, and are the strongest monster incarnates of the current era with dazzling battle results. More than 100 years ago, Dao being Heavenly Dipper fought against the current Shura of the era to a draw. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He had witnessed Yan Beichen's combat strength personally. The fact that Dao being Heavenly Dipper could fight against Yan Beichen to a draw was unimaginable how terrifying his combat strength was. A hint of hesitation appeared in Su Zimo's heart. All of a sudden, he felt an immense pressure that made it hard for him to breathe. The enemies he was about to face were way too strong. If he entered the Dao inheritance ground this time round, he would face the greatest danger in his cultivation. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Su Zimo's sudden appearance finally triggered the greatest reaction of the super sects, and they did not hesitate to send out their titular disciples to kill him. Haku Dojin said, Apart from the 3 of them, I reckon that Sword Sect will make a move as well. The titular disciple of Sword Sect was the Dharma Dao Jun. Although he could not enter the Dao inheritance ground, the heaven-slaying sword art was in Su Zimo's possession. Sword Sect would definitely not let this matter rest. Shangguanzi said, This is only confirmed news. There are still some unknowns and uncertainties. The true situation you're facing is even more severe than what you know now. The Dao inheritance ground was not a secret space. As long as one was at the conjoined body realm, they could activate it. At that time, countless cultivators would surge in. As for how many of those cultivators had their eyes on Su Zimo, no one knew. Su Zimo frowned and remained silent. Everyone was clearly aware that he was facing a difficult choice at this moment. If he retreated, his life would not be in danger. With Hake Dojin as his backing, his future potential was limitless. If he entered, he would most likely die. Shangguanzi said gently, Actually, you don't have to feel too burdened. We don't agree with you accepting the challenge in the Dao inheritance ground. Hake Dojin nodded. The Dao inheritance ground is a space created by many ancient mighty figures, and has a unique barrier. Only Jining Zhenjuan and Void Reversions can enter. I've just advanced to the conjoint body realm, and can only help you open the Dao inheritance ground. However, if you encounter danger inside, my strength won't be able to penetrate that barrier and I won't be able to help. Pausing for a moment, Dojin continued, void reversions of 100 refinement sect can enter, but they won't be able to withstand a single blow from a titular disciple. If they enter to help you, they'll only die for nothing. Although his words were heartless, it was an indisputable fact. No void reversion would dare to enter the Dao inheritance ground and stand on Su Zimo's side. This meant that once Su Zimo entered the Dao inheritance ground, he would have to face everything alone. Elder Gu persuaded, you don't have to make a decision in a hurry. You still have a month to consider. There's still time. Dojin and the others exchanged glances and prepared to leave quietly, leaving Su Zimo alone. I've made up my mind. Just as Extreme Fire and the others arrived at the entrance of the hall, Su Zimo's voice sounded. A month later, I'll enter the Dao inheritance ground and accept all challenges. After saying that, Su Zimo felt as though all the pressure on him disappeared instantly and he suddenly felt relaxed. There was no retreat for his Dao. Chapter 990. When he heard Su Zimo's decision, Dojin smiled gently and turned to look at Shangguanzi, Elder Gu and the others. I won. To think, truly to think. Elder Gu shook his head and laughed bitterly. Elder Gu lamented, that's right. There's a slim chance of survival this time. To think that he would still dare to accept the challenge. That guts and boldness are worthy of all his current glory. Before this, everyone had made a bet. Everyone guessed that as long as they explained the dangers involved, Su Zimo would definitely not accept the challenge. Dojin was the only one who firmly believed that Su Zimo would definitely go. Dojin said, I've won this bet. I'll have to trouble everyone. A bet is a loss. Don't worry. Elder Gu and the others smiled. Su Zimo was confused when he heard that. Just as he was about to ask, Dojin turned to look at him and smiled. Go on. There's still a month's time. Relax and adjust your state of mind. Come and look for me here a month later. All right, Su Zimo nodded and turned to leave. Outside the hall, Su Zimo stood against the wind with his black hair fluttering and a resolute gaze. If he was afraid of even this bit of danger, there was no need for him to establish a Dao. He might as well learn from others and seek the great Dao of immortality. Su Zimo moved and walked out of 100 Refinement Sect, intending to bid farewell to Yen Beichen. When he arrived at the peak, he realized that the cave abode was already empty. There was a line of words left on the wall. Zimo, I've already left. Don't worry. The words were carved with a blade and were filled with saber intent. Su Zimo smiled gently. This was indeed Yen Beichen's personality. He was carefree and unrestrained, coming and going as he pleased. That was what made him happy. Su Zimo decided to go into seclusion in the cave abode. Looking at the words on the wall, he used his palm as a knife and constantly tried to figure out the saber intent. Su Zimo was in no hurry. Even if he cultivated with all his might, it would be impossible for him to break through to the void return stage in a short month. In the following days, Su Zimo spent his days leisurely. Every day, he would sit at the entrance of the cave and watch the sunrise and sunset. Occasionally, he would face the wall and practice his saber skills. When night fell, they lay down to rest. He did not cultivate much, but his condition was getting better and better. At the same time, a piece of news spread out, causing the entire cultivation world to be in an uproar. Su Zimo accepted the challenge. When Di'in had set the location of the battle at the Dao inheritance ground, countless news and speculations had spread. Almost no one was optimistic about Su Zimo. Later on, when they heard that the titular disciples of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Heavenly Dipper sect and other immortal sects were about to enter the Dao inheritance ground as well, many cultivators were certain that Su Zimo would not accept the challenge. If Jining Zhenjuan entered the Dao inheritance ground and faced the titular disciples, it would be equivalent to courting death. However, not long after, the news of Su Zimo accepting the challenge spread and caused an uproar. After 100 years, the two monster incarnates Su Zimo and Di'in will fight once more in the Dao inheritance ground in a life and death battle. I reckon that Su Zimo will be killed by the other titular disciples before he can meet Di'in. A few titular disciples coming out at the same time to kill a monster incarnate can be considered as the greatest commotion in the history of the cultivation world. There's going to be a show. Some were shocked, some mocked, and some were worried. For the past month, all the sects and factions that had the ability to open up the Tao inheritance ground would send their cultivators in, intending to witness this unprecedented battle. A month later, Su Zimo walked out of the cave abode. Although his cultivation realm did not change, his state of mind, essence, chi and spirit had already been adjusted to their peak. When he returned to the main hall of 100 Refinement sect, Hakuya and the others were already waiting. Hakuya slapped his storage bag and took out a long saber that shone with a cold aura and a shimmering golden inner armor. Hakuya wielded the saber and injected dermic powers. The saber trembled and 6 patterns burst forth. This saber is called Heaven Splitter, a Khanate Tao being dermic weapon. With that said, Hakuya waved his hand casually and a bedazzling saber beam tore through the air, as though it was going to slice the heavens apart. This inner armor is a perfect Tao being dermic weapon. Its size can change according to your figure. Hakuya handed Heaven Splitter and the inner armor to Su Zimo. After entering the Tao inheritance ground, I won't be able to help you with anything. Thankfully, I refined 2 dermic weapons this month. They're not bad. Take them. Thank you, Master. Su Zimo was touched and did not decline. He put on the inner armor and kept Heaven Splitter in his storage bag. His journey was fraught with danger, and Heaven Splitter and the inner armor were both things that he lacked. Of course, given Hakuya capabilities, it was not difficult for him to refine Tao Lord dermic weapons. However, for Su Zimo, even if he had a Tao Lord dermic weapon, it would be difficult for him to activate it. It was already his limit for his essence spirit to be able to activate Tao being dermic weapons. Hang this jade pendant on your waist. In times of danger, you just have to shatter it, and you'll be able to defend against the strongest attack of the Void Reversion realm. Shangguanzi took out a jade pendant and handed it to Su Zimo. Protection dermic weapon? Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Back in the intermediate ancient battlefield, if Diin had not crushed the protection dermic weapon on him, he would have been killed by Su Zimo. Protection dermic weapons were extremely rare, and were even more precious than Khanate dermic weapons. There was no market for them, and countless runes were fused into them, and they were extremely difficult to refine. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had only encountered Diin once when he fought against many paragons and monster incarnates. This item is too valuable. Su Zimo had just extended his hand when he shook his head and retracted it. Take it. Shangguanzi's gaze was gentle as she smiled. Previously we made a bet with your master. We lost, and this is the bet. Ah! A look of realization flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Lad, take it, Elder Gu chuckled. It's not just about the bet. Can't you tell the relationship between Shangguanzi and your master? Although Shangguanzi was thousands of years old, she blushed and glared at Elder Gu when she heard that. Su Zimo smiled and hurriedly received the jade pendant, saying with a smile, "Thank you, Master's wife." "Child, what nonsense are you spouting?" Shangguanzi was elated to be addressed as Master's wife. However, she pretended to be reserved on the surface and chided in a neutral manner. Hakuya coughed gently and changed the topic. He looked at Elder Gu of Elixir Yang sect and asked, "Old Gu, where's your bet?" "Don't worry, I won't mistreat your precious disciple." Elder Gu flipped his palm and a small bottle appeared in his palm. He handed it to Su Zimo and said in a deep voice, "This is the great essence life extending elixir. Unless your essence spirit is directly wiped out, no matter how severely injured you are and how close you are to death, as long as you consume this elixir, you will be able to hang on to your last breath." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. That was a treasure that was not weaker than a protection dermic weapon. Elder Gu reminded again, "Remember, this elixir can hang on to your last breath for a month at most. You have to think of other ways to survive. It could only extend one's life and not save it." Even so, this elixir was heaven-defying enough. Each of these gifts was more powerful than the last. Hakuya had already done his best for Su Zimo. Chapter 991. Old Gu, where's your item? Hakuya and the others looked at Elder Gu with mocking gazes. Shangguanzi harumphed. "Old man Gu, take a look at what we've taken out." If your item is too lousy, don't embarrass yourself by taking it out. Shangguan, the two of you haven't even become Dao companions yet, and you're already siding with Extreme Fire's disciple. Seriously? Elder Gu huffed and glared, looking like he was in a difficult spot. 100 Refinement Sect could refine weapons. Chiguramon could craft talismans, and Elixir Yang Sect could refine elixirs. As for Ancient Array Sect, they could only set up formations. Initially, he had indeed prepared a gift, a sword formation technique. However, from the looks of it, his sword formation technique was way too weak compared to the protection dermic weapon and great essence life extending elixir. Looking at the mocking gazes of Hakuya Dojin and the other two, Elder Gu grit his teeth and took out a beast skin from his storage bag, handing it to Suzimo. What's this? Elder Gu could not help but lean forward and mumble, "Are you trying to fool us with a piece of lousy beast skin?" Hakuya Dojin and Shangguanzi swept their gazes and were shocked when they saw the complicated and mysterious patterns on the beast's skin. "Oh Gu, you're even willing to take this out?" Hakuya Dojin asked. Elder Gu grit his teeth. "It's all because you guys forced me. Hurry up and take it away or I might regret it." Shangguanzi looked at Suzimo and smiled. "Accept it. This is one of the few treasures old Gu has." Curious, Suzimo took over the beast skin and took a look. Mysterious formation patterns were carved on the beast's skin, forming a fan shape that was 100 times more complicated than any formation pattern Suzimo had seen before. Elder Gu said, "In the primordial era, there were teleportation formations. As long as they were activated, they could teleport cultivators billions of kilometers away. It wouldn't be a problem for them to cross the entire Tianhuang mainland. Unfortunately, formation patterns have long been lost by now." Suzimo's heart skipped a beat as he exclaimed, "These are the formation patterns of teleportation formations?" "Humph," Elder Gu said, "in your dreams. This is just a broken rune of the teleportation array. However, if you can really comprehend it, you will be able to gain something." Although it was only an incomplete formation, this treasure was still shocking enough. From a certain point of view, it was even more valuable than Hakuya Dojin and the others' magical artifacts and pills. Elder Gu thought for a moment, coughed lightly and said, "Also, don't blame me for not reminding you. If you can really comprehend it and activate this incomplete formation, don't step into it." "The cultivator you lost earlier hasn't returned yet?" Hakuya Dojin asked. Elder Gu looked embarrassed. He snorted and didn't have the nerve to reply. Shangguanzi was apprehensive of Elder Gu's face and transmitted to Suzimo, "More than 5,000 years ago, Old Man Gu set up this incomplete array according to the array patterns on it. At that time, 10 cultivators from Ancient Array Sect volunteered to give it a try. However, after the 10 cultivators were teleported out, they never returned. There's no news of them for more than 5,000 years. They should be doomed." Suzimo was secretly speechless. Although this incomplete formation was precious, it was truly dangerous. Who knew where they would be teleported to after activating it? If they were teleported directly to the lair of some Dragon Bone Valley, they would probably be killed by the dragons right away. Even 10 lives would not be enough. Suzimo put away the beast hide. At least for now, he had no use for it. After everything was prepared, Hakuya Dojin closed his eyes and released his spirit consciousness, extending it continuously to sense the spatial node of the Dao inheritance ground. All of a sudden, Hakuya Dojin extended his palm and a ball of flames appeared in his palm. A hole was burned through the void and it grew larger and larger. It was dark inside, chaotic and misty. "Go," Hakuya Dojin said. "I can maintain this teleportation entrance for about a month. If you see that things aren't going well, retreat to this entrance and return in time." Suzimo nodded and took a deep breath of air. He leaped into the gigantic hole in the void and disappeared. "Sai, there are a few titular disciples inside. He's most likely doomed." Shangguanzi sighed. Hakuya Dojin said in a low voice, "It's not like there's no chance. If he can establish his Dao heart and obtain the inheritance of the mighty figure inside, his combat strength will increase slightly." "It won't be of much use," Elder Gu shook his head. "Even if he obtains the inheritance of a mighty figure, the spirit chi inside is exhausted, and there's almost no way for him to cultivate. His cultivation realm won't be able to increase." With the difference of a major cultivation realm and the means of the demons being suppressed, there's really no chance of winning against Diin and the others. Hake Dojin murmured softly, I hope he can survive this calamity. Call Dao Bing Yuding and the others over, Hake Dojin instructed again. Before long, Dao Bing Yuding and dozens of void reversions arrived. Some of you have already established your Dao hearts while some of you haven't. You just have to search for your own opportunities when you enter this time round. Hake Dojin did not request for his disciples to help Su Zimo. Even if he requested, none of the disciples would dare to help. Although they were void reversions, their combat strength was far inferior to titular disciples. Who would dare to risk their lives to help Su Zimo? Right then, 100 Refinement Sect cultivator walked in hurriedly with an excited expression. Patriarch, there's a fiend demon outside who is trying to sneak into the sect. He has already been frozen by the demon-revealing mirror, and his true form is a double-worm. Pausing for a moment, the cultivator hesitated. However, what? However, this fiend demon calls himself Solitary Cloud and says that he knows Su Zimo. Hake Dojin exclaimed softly with a puzzled expression. Bring him here. His essence spirit had been in the Mingwang prayer beads the entire time and naturally knew that Solitary Cloud was a pure-blooded WRM that Su Zimo subdued in Thousand Demon Valley. Before long, Solitary Cloud was brought to the main hall. His face looked pale as though he had just now. He was severely injured. It's really you? Hake Dojin recognized Solitary Cloud immediately and asked with a frown, What are you doing here? Didn't Zimo leave you at Howling Moon Mountain? Solitary Cloud did not know Hake Dojin. However, the moment he left Howling Moon Mountain, he heard the news of the cultivation world and knew that 100 Refinement Sect was on the same side as Su Zimo. Solitary Cloud knelt on the ground and cupped his fists. Seniors, I was originally a WRM of Thousand Demon Valley. Later on, I was taken in as a mount because of my master's favor. I heard that it's extremely dangerous for my master to head to the Dao inheritance ground. How can I be indifferent and stay out of it? Seniors, please allow me to enter and stand side by side with my master. Little WRM, you sure are loyal, Elder Gu chuckled. However, the Dao inheritance ground is the sacred ground of the human race. You don't know what's going on inside. When fiend demons enter, they won't be able to conjure their true forms or release any demonic arts. The only thing they can use is their bodies. I know. Solitary Cloud nodded. This time round, Hake Dojin and the others did not laugh. Elder Gu frowned. Do you know that there are countless cultivators inside? If your fiend demon identity is exposed, you'll die without a burial ground. I know. Solitary Cloud nodded. Do you know that even Su Zimo is not confident against Diin and the others? If you enter, you'll be courting death. Solitary Cloud said, I know. You still want to go even if you know? Elder Gu asked. Solitary Cloud said, I once swore that I'm willing to follow my master through life and death. Everyone was moved. Chapter 992. Hake Dojin's gaze gradually softened as he said softly, Now that you're injured, 100 Refinement Sect was reckless. Recuperate for a day first. There's no need to be too anxious. That's right. You won't be able to help much even if you enter in your current state. Elder Gu walked forward and stuffed 2 small bottles into Solitary Cloud's hands. Apply the white one externally and consume the red one internally. Your injuries will be healed very quickly. Thank you, Senior. Solitary Cloud nodded and was brought away by the 100 Refinement Sect disciples to rest. He was prepared to enter the Dao inheritance ground after resting for a day. Shangguanzi and the others had complicated expressions as they watched Solitary Cloud leave. Elder Gu sighed. To think that there would be such a loyal person among fiend demons. That's admirable. Hake Dojin said. Fiend demons are the same as humans. There are good and evil. Sometimes the more I interact with demons, the more I like their straightforward and carefree temperament. They are not hypocritical, scheming. Su Zimo had stayed in Thousand Demon Valley for 100 years and Hake Dojin had witnessed every single moment of his interactions with Monkey and the others for the past 100 years. Above a ruin, a strong wind blew and gravel filled the air. There was no sign of life and the entire place was barren. All of a sudden, a gigantic hole split open in the firmaments. It was dark and deep as a figure fell from within. The moment it arrived in midair, it stabilized itself. Surveying his surroundings, Su Zimo released his spirit consciousness and scanned every single corner of the place. Is this the Tao inheritance ground? Su Zimo murmured softly. After investigating for a long time, he retracted his spirit consciousness. There's no danger nearby, but the spirit chi is really thin. Su Zimo channeled his bloodline slowly. Swoosh! The space around him seemed to have sensed something, causing a great pressure to descend upon him. He could not move at all against that pressure. True enough, Su Zimo could sense that if he forcefully channeled his bloodline, he would be crushed by the pressure instantly. This was the will of many ancient mighty figures. This was the sacred land of the human race. Countless human powerhouses had left behind their legacies here. No other race was allowed to touch it. Su Zimo did not dare to move recklessly. The blood in his body gradually calmed down, and the enormous pressure disappeared, as if it had never existed. After a moment of silence, the scarlet-haired deity stirred within Su Zimo's sea of consciousness. There was no reaction from the surroundings. Just now the pressure didn't appear either. Perhaps even the ancient great powers did not expect that a freak like Su Zimo would appear in the future. He tried several times in a row. Su Zimo discovered that although the scarlet-haired spirit could move freely in his sea of consciousness, and could even fuse with the black-haired essence soul, the scarlet-haired spirit could not move freely. However, the scarlet-haired spirit's consciousness could not be released. Furthermore, after the fusion, the release of spirit consciousness or the release of dharmic arts would similarly attract the suppression of ancient mighty figures. In other words, his demon clan's methods had been completely suppressed. Su Zimo was not discouraged. That was within his expectations. After determining the direction, Su Zimo headed east. He was not fast and paid attention to his surroundings at all times. Before long, a gigantic stone stele appeared before him. It was more than 100 feet tall and stood in the ruins with the aura of time. There were more than 10 void reversions standing at the foot of the stone stele. Su Zimo walked closer and looked up. There were a few lines of words carved on the stone stele. They were written in a bold and arrogant manner. My Tao title is Scarlet Peak. After cultivating for 5,000 years, I've finally entered the conjoined body realm. The Dharma Tao Jun had a lifespan of 10,000 years and cultivated for 5,000 years. He was at his peak and could definitely be considered as a paragon of a generation now that he was at the conjoint body realm. I reigned supreme in the world and rarely lost. Jin Dan is ranked 78th on the phenomenon ranking and 65th on the heaven and earth dharma characteristic ranking. I once killed the paragons of the 3 immortal sects. It was clear that the words on the stone stele were left behind by mighty figure Scarlet Peak. Most of the words were reminiscing about his past glory. Unfortunately, after 15,000 years, I was still unable to break through the final step and stopped at the conjoint body realm. How tragic! So what if I had the glory of 10,000 lifetimes? In the end, I could not withstand the passage of time and turned into dust. At the conjoint body realm, a cultivator's lifespan could reach 20,000 years. Mighty figure Scarlet Peak entered the conjoint body realm at 5,000 years old. To think that he would still not be able to enter the Mahayana realm after 15,000 years. Chi condensation, foundation establishment, Jin Dan, nascent soul, void reversion, dharma characteristic, conjoint body, Mahayana and tribulation transcendence. The further one progressed, the harder it was to cultivate. Mighty figure Scarlet Peak was almost at the peak of the cultivation world. However, he still died with regrets after exhausting his lifespan. This was the cruelness of cultivation. Before I died, I entered this place and organized everything I had learned in my life. I left behind a portion of the Heavenly Roar World Sutra for the Fated One. That was the final sentence on the stone stele. In this lifetime, I'm willing to pursue the great Tao of longevity. Even if I die, I won't regret it to make up for your regrets. Senior, please bestow your inheritance. I'll definitely live up to your reputation in life. A void reversion stood on the stone stele and shouted. The moment that person said that, another void reversion said, Senior Scarlet Peak. My parents are dead and were devoured by demon beasts. In this lifetime, I'm willing to slay demons and serve the world in a chivalrous manner to return peace to the world. Senior Scarlet Peak. I'm willing to live a carefree life with a light sword and a fast horse. Please bestow your inheritance, Senior. One after another, cultivators establish their Dao hearts beneath the stone steel. Generally speaking, if a cultivator's Dao heart matched the wishes of the ancient mighty figure when he was alive, the inheritance would descend. Of course, there were all sorts of conditions for triggering opportunities. Some conjoint body mighty figures would write directly that the cultivator had to transcend the wind or fire tribulations. Before long, more than 10 cultivators shouted once, but there was no reaction from the stone steel. Fellow Taoist, aren't you going to try? A cultivator noticed Su Zimo and called out with cupped fists. Nope. Su Zimo smiled gently and shook his head in rejection. Apart from fighting Di'in, he had another motive for entering the Dao inheritance ground. To establish his Dao heart and search for a suitable inheritance for himself. Although the inheritance left behind by mighty figure Scarlet Peak before him was not bad, it was not what he had imagined. Let's go and look for others. The cultivators dispersed quickly. Only a skinny man did not leave and knelt motionlessly in front of the stone steel. Who is that? He's been kneeling here since before we came. I don't know. I heard that he's an itinerant cultivator without a sect. He's been kneeling here for many years without leaving. This person is stubborn as well. If he can't obtain the recognition of mighty figure Scarlet Peak, he can just change to another one. How can he be so stubborn? Many cultivators discussed. Right at this moment, the stone tablet suddenly trembled, and countless dust fell from it. The gigantic stone steel burst forth with a bedazzling beam of light that shot into the skies. A phenomenon has been born. Someone has obtained the inheritance. Everyone paused in their tracks and looked at the stone steel with dumbfounded expressions. Generally speaking, any phenomenon that obtained a certain inheritance would appear. The skinny man had an excited expression as he reached out and pressed his palm against the stone steel gently. Suddenly, he turned into a streak of light and disappeared into the stone steel. This meant that the skinny man had already obtained the recognition of mighty figure Scarlet Peak, and entered the stone steel to receive the inheritance. Su Zimo nodded to himself. This person had waited bitterly for so many years. The fact that he could obtain such an outcome was a testament to his sincerity. Chapter 993. Su Zimo continued forward. Before long, a stone statue appeared in front of him. The stone statue leaned against a green stone with a lazy expression and sloppy clothes. Its chest was half exposed and its eyes were blurry with drunkenness. It even held a wine jar in its left hand in a lifelike manner. There were a few lines of words written on the side of the stone statue. I am drunk in life. I've enjoyed wine my entire life. You guys cultivate for longevity, but I want to drink for a few more years, ha ha ha. Phenomenon ranking? Dharma characteristic ranking? None of them are as satisfying as good wine. As the saying goes, the long journey of cultivation is nothing compared to being drunk in life. With just a few words, mighty figure drunk in life seemed to have come alive in Su Zimo's eyes. He was wild and unrestrained as though he was in a drunken stupor. When he left those words, the mighty figure seemed to be still drinking and his handwriting was messy. He was already dead drunk. This mighty figure was considered an anomaly as he cultivated to the conjoint body realm just to drink for a few more years. I heard that mighty figure drunk in life was extremely famous in the cultivation world back then. Don't be fooled by his lack of glory. This senior was once number 10 on the phenomenon ranking, and number 9 on the Dharma characteristic ranking. His combat strength is shocking. Many cultivators discussed softly. Mighty figure drunk in life was clearly much stronger than mighty figure Scarlet Peak, who was just now. There were even more cultivators gathered around the stone statue. There were dozens of them, and there were still cultivators rushing over from not far away. I'm willing to seek longevity. I'm also willing to seek the Tao of longevity in this lifetime. Like senior, I like to drink. Many cultivators shouted around the stone statue. There were all sorts of Tao hearts and most of them sought the Tao of longevity. However, the stone statue did not move at all. Right then, a cultivator squeezed through the crowd and arrived beside the stone statue. He took out a jar of wine from his storage bag and removed the mud seal, causing the fragrance of wine to spread. "Senior, I've brought good wine to see you." As the person spoke, he poured all the wine into the jar in the hands of the stone statue. Swoosh! Suddenly, the stone statue moved and opened its mouth slightly, releasing a stream of wine qi that surged into the clouds and enveloped the person. In the blink of an eye, the person vanished from the spot. Holy**T, that works too? This senior drunken life is too careless. Sigh, why didn't I think of this? Some cultivators were stunned, some sighed, and some regretted. Su Zimo laughed involuntarily. This senior drunken life was truly a carefree and unrestrained person. Look at that green-robed cultivator. Could he be the monster incarnate Su Zimo who has been extremely famous recently? A void reversion in the crowd pointed at Su Zimo and asked mysteriously, "I heard that Su Zimo has a terrifying physical body and is invincible in close combat. He must be tall and strong. This person looks delicate and thin. Could it be him? Don't be so surprised. There are many people who wear green robes. How could one of them be Su Zimo?" "Haha, I was just speaking casually. How could there be such a coincidence? Look at how scared you are." The first cultivator laughed loudly. The first time Su Zimo appeared in the Middle Continent was at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. However, almost everyone at the Thousand Crane Tea Party was Jining Jinjuan. Not many void reversions of the cultivation world had seen Su Zimo before. "Hurry and take a look. There's a fight over there." "Where is it? Who's with whom?" The Wind Sword inheritance guarded by Sword Sect was intruded by another sword cultivator and both sides are fighting. "Let's go and take a look." The void reversions that were initially gathered near the stone statue rushed in the same direction. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo followed. Before long, Su Zimo's hearing was strong and he heard the sounds of sword qi and metal clashing. On the distant horizon, there was a sword that pierced into the clouds. It was dozens of feet tall and was stabbed into the ground diagonally in an extremely shocking manner. Below the long sword, there were sword lights dancing in the air. The 7 sword cultivators of Sword Sect stood in specific positions and were connected to each other, forming an extremely mysterious sword formation that trapped another sword cultivator in the middle. The 7 sword cultivators of Sword Sect were all at the perfected void reversion realm. In their hands, the sword formation was clearly perfected and they cooperated well. Sword qi surged and became sharper and more intense. The trapped sword cultivator had black hair and black robes. His face was a little pale and his eyes were empty. He was only at the early stage void reversion realm. Initially, the black-robed sword cultivator could still retaliate a few times. However, as the sword formation was fully released, he could only dodge continuously and defend passively. He was completely disadvantaged. Su Zimo's expression changed. He did not know any of the sword cultivators of Sword Sect. However, the black-robed sword cultivator was an old friend. Dugu Jian of the aristocratic families of the North region. Dugu Jian was reclusive and taciturn, never taking the initiative to converse with others. It was as though the only thing in his eyes was the sword in his hand. However, Su Zimo had a rather good impression of him. It was not only because Dugu Jian had helped him in the Great Qian ruins. More than that, it was because 100 years ago in Myriad Phenomenon City, when the catastrophe arrived and all the paragons retreated, Dugu Jian was the first to stand out. In Su Zimo's eyes, he was a true sword cultivator. To think that after 100 years, this old friend of his had already advanced to the void reversion realm. Su Zimo observed for a moment. Apart from the 7 sword cultivators of Sword Sect on the battlefield, there were more than 10 sword cultivators of Sword Sect guarding the surroundings with sharp gazes, preventing outsiders from interfering. There were even a few corpses of sword cultivators of Sword Sect at the foot of the gigantic sword. All of them were killed cleanly with a single slash in their glabella. To be fair, Sword Sect is indeed a little domineering. The inheritance of the Dao inheritance ground depends entirely on opportunity. However, Sword Sect has been occupying the inheritance of this mighty figure Wind Sword all year round and forbade outsiders from entering. That's right. Sword Sect is powerful. and it's a pilgrimage ground for sword cultivators in the world. Who would dare to go against them? Among the spectators, many cultivators were discussing among themselves, "This black-robed man is not weak. Just now, he barged in alone and killed a sword cultivator of sword sect in a few moves. His sword technique is extremely fast. Unfortunately, he came at the wrong time." Initially, there were only 20 sword cultivators of sword sect guarding this wind sword inheritance. However, these 7 sword cultivators came in later, and are familiar with sword sect's 7 luminary sword formation. If the 7 of them join forces, they can fight against titular disciples. I heard that these 7 sword cultivators came for that monster incarnate Suzimo. In the end, they bumped into the battle between the black-robed man and the sword cultivators of sword sect. The 7 of them attacked decisively and surrounded him. The difference in their cultivation realms is too great. If this continues, the black-robed man will definitely die. Just as that person was analyzing, a tremendous force pushed him away from behind. Enraged, that person turned around and looked at the green-robed cultivator who was squeezing over, saying coldly, "What are you squeezing for? Can't you see?" Anyone who could enter the Tao inheritance ground was capable. This person came from the 108 upper sects and naturally would not be at a disadvantage. "Excuse me." Suzimo glanced at that person indifferently and pushed him away casually, walking towards the battlefield below the sword. "Humph!" That person spat at Suzimo's back view and scolded. "What's there to be arrogant about? You look like you're rushing to your death. Do you think that you're Suzimo just because you're wearing green robes?" Chapter 994. In the Battle of Sword Sect, none of the cultivators dared to advance, afraid that they would be implicated. They merely watched from afar and discussed softly. At that moment, Suzimo was extremely eye-catching as he walked towards the battlefield. "Who is that? Is he courting death? I don't know. He doesn't have any sect insignia on him. He's probably an itinerant cultivator. No, that person's cultivation realm is so low. He's actually at the nascent soul realm. A nascent soul is truly courting death by coming to the Tao inheritance ground at this time." The crowd pointed at Suzimo's back view and gossiped. The dozens of sword cultivators standing outside the battlefield noticed Suzimo as well. "Back down." The sword cultivator who was facing Suzimo hollered at him with a cold gaze. Suzimo had an indifferent expression. Naturally, he would not be scared off by a sword cultivator and continued forward. "You must have a death wish." The sword cultivator did not say anything else and leaped forward. With a clang he drew his sword and became one with it, transforming into a streak of light that stabbed forward. Shoo! In the blink of an eye, the sword beam had already arrived in front of Suzimo without any intention of holding back. Suzimo's expression was calm, and there was not even a ripple in his eyes. The sword cultivator did not take him seriously at all. Although his attacks seemed sharp in reality, he did not use his full strength. In Suzimo's eyes, the sword cultivator was full of openings. At that moment, he had at least 10 different methods that he could use to kill the other party. Suzimo's body swayed and the sword pierced past his cheek by a hair's breadth. The sword cultivator was shocked. This kind of dodging action required an extremely terrifying combat talent and rich combat experience. The slightest mistake would result in death. This person is not simple. That thought flashed through the sword cultivator's mind. Just as he was about to turn his sword and slash horizontally, he saw a fair and slender finger piercing before his eyes. With the difference of a single move, Suzimo would not give the person a second chance to attack. He extended his finger and pierced the person's glabella. His primordial spirit was also shattered by Suzimo's dermic powers. A nascent soul realm cultivator dares to step forward? I bet that the victor will be decided in one round. A sword cultivator from the sword faction only needs one sword strike. In the crowd, a cultivator's voice stopped abruptly. The crowd of cultivators widened their eyes in disbelief at the scene on the battlefield. The cultivator was right. When the two people exchanged blows, the victor was indeed decided in one round. However, the person who lost was a sword cultivator from the sword sect. Plop. Only when the sword cultivator's corpse fell to the ground did many cultivators recover from their shock and let out a series of exclamations. Am I seeing things? How is this possible? A return to void stage sword cultivator from the sword sect was killed by Jining Jinjuan with a single strike? Furthermore, he killed it with his bare hands. Maybe this sword cultivator was too careless? Waves of voices rose and fell from the crowd. The dozen or so sword cultivators who were originally standing still had a stern expression on their faces. They moved closer to them, their expressions unfriendly and their gazes sharp. Who are you? A sword cultivator questioned loudly. I'm the person you're looking for. Su Zimo did not stop in his tracks and smiled mockingly. Why are you guys unable to recognize me even though I've taken the initiative to come here? These sword cultivators had been guarding the wind sword inheritance for the past few years and knew nothing about the cultivation world, let alone Su Zimo. However, the 7 sword cultivators who were initially attacking Du Gujian felt their hearts skip a beat and glanced over. This glance caused the hearts of the 7 people to tremble. Su Zimo. The 7 of them entered the inheritance ground for Su Zimo. Although they had never seen Su Zimo before, sword sect cultivators had already described Su Zimo's appearance. Someone in green robes might not be Su Zimo. However, Su Zimo was probably the only Jining Zhenjuan who could kill a void reversion in a single move, and was dressed in green robes with delicate features. The 7 of them were alarmed and almost caused the 7 luminaries' sword formation to stop. Thankfully, the 7 of them were experienced and calmed down quickly. They continued circulating the sword formation and channeling dermic powers, prepared to kill Du Gujian as soon as possible. All of you join forces and stop him. Among the 7 of them, a sword cultivator who seemed to be the leader shouted. He was very clear that he did not expect the sword cultivators to be able to kill Su Zimo. He merely hoped that they could stall Su Zimo for a moment and buy the 7 of them some time. Senior brother Li Quan, don't worry. Leave this person to me. I'll definitely chop off his head within 10 breaths. A sword cultivator volunteered and stood out. That person was filled with disdain. He could not understand why senior brother Li Quan would be so cautious against Jining Jinjuan, and even asked them to attack together. That person had just turned around and was about to charge forward with his sword when a sacred Sanskrit sounded in his ears. That Sanskrit caused his heart to skip a beat, and even his essence spirit trembled. Sound domain secret skill. A thought flashed through that person's mind. However, in that moment of shock, his vision blurred and a green figure had already arrived before him. The figure extended a fair and slender finger and tapped his glabella gently. He clearly saw the finger stabbing towards him, but he couldn't dodge it at all. He was completely stunned by the Sanskrit sound and his reaction became extremely sluggish. Poof! A bloody hole appeared on that person's glabella. His essence spirit was destroyed. The 2 sword cultivators died in the same manner. The commotion in the crowd was even more obvious. It was only at this moment that many cultivators, including the sword cultivators present, realized that the death of the 2 sword cultivators was definitely not a coincidence. To that person, can't be Su Zimo, right? A trembling voice sounded from the crowd. Just now, the cultivator who was spitting at Su Zimo shuddered in fear and murmured with a pale face, "It can't be, right? Apart from him, who else can possess such terrifying combat strength at the nascent soul realm?" A cultivator asked instead. Right then, Dao Bing Li Quan, who was attacking Du Gujian, was a little anxious and could not help but shout, "That person is the #1 monster incarnate of history, Su Zimo. He can kill void reversions above his level. Don't be careless. All you have to do is join forces and stall him for a moment." The moment he said that, the crowd exploded. Su Zimo is really here. That's the #1 perfected lord of Tianhuang mainland? I heard that his physique is strong and he's invincible in melee combat. Why does he look so weak? If they had not witnessed it personally, no one would have associated Su Zimo with the titles of #1 of the phenomenon ranking, #1 perfected lord with a terrifying physique and invincible melee combat at first glance. Ha 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 ha. When he heard Dao Bing Li Quan's shout, Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. He slapped his storage bag and withdrew Heaven Splitter, shouting heroically, Do you think that these nobodies can stop me? Chapter 995. This was the first time a sword cultivator of sword sect was treated as a nobody. Clang! The saber trembled and 6 resplendent dermic patterns burst forth. It's a connate dermic weapon. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Su Zimo waved his saber and slashed forward. The entire saber extended like a gigantic heavenly saber descending from the skies and slashing into the crowd of sword cultivators. The aura of that slash was way too strong, as though it wanted to split the world. The expressions of many sword cultivators changed starkly as they blocked with their swords. Boom! The heavenly saber descended and collided with the swords of many sword cultivators, causing the ground to tremble with a loud bang. Exclamation point! A sword cultivator could not withstand the terrifying power released by Heaven Splitter, and was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood and looked dispirited. The terrifying power surged into that person's body and destroyed his life force completely. Haha! Su Zimo laughed and passed through the crowd. Kill! The remaining sword cultivators attacked one after another and roared. Instantly, sword chi streaked across the entire battlefield, almost slicing the void into pieces and enveloping Su Zimo. Raging waves. Su Zimo slashed in reverse and the sound of a tsunami suddenly sounded from the saber. It grew more intense and rumbled. The moment the saber descended, the entire battlefield was surrounded by a vast ocean. It was dark and bottomless as the seawater surged. Countless raging waves rose from the ground and swept the sword cultivators around him in saber intent. More than 10 sword cultivators were trapped in Su Zimo's saber intent and could barely fend for themselves, let alone stop Su Zimo. Dao Bing Li Quan was shocked when he caught sight of that. A green shadow flashed and Su Zimo arrived before him. Dao Bing Li Quan only had time to say a single word before Su Zimo's heaven splitter slashed down at him. I've said it before. These cats and dogs can't stop me. Dao Bing Li Quan channeled his blood chi and gathered dermic powers. He turned his sword and blocked heaven splitter. Clang! An ear-piercing sound rang out, and sparks flew everywhere. Amongst all the sword cultivators in the sword sect, Daoist Li Quan was considered to be the strongest. However, when he received Su Zimo's attack, he still felt his arms go numb. His chi and blood churned, and he almost vomited. How terrifying! Some legends about Su Zimo appeared in Dao Bing Li Quan's mind. Legend has it that this person has the bloodline of the demon race flowing in his body, and he can't use it in the Dao inheritance ground. He has such explosive power just by relying on his physical body. If he can activate his bloodline, I'm afraid I won't be able to block a single slash. Just as Dao Bing Li Quan's imagination was running wild, Su Zimo's second slash had already descended. Take another strike from me. Voila! The sound of waves could be heard. This saber strike seemed to have split the oncoming waves in half. Going against the current, it erupted with a power that made one's heart tremble. Clang! When the saber and sword collided, Daoist Li Quan's entire body trembled. He could no longer resist and staggered back. The color on his face faded, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. 2 slashes. He was already injured. However, this was only the beginning. With Dao Bing Li Quan injured, the formation paused and its power decreased sharply. Dugu Jian, who had been dodging the entire time, seized the opportunity and attacked suddenly. An incomparably stunning sword beam tore through the horizons. It was too fast. Apart from Su Zimo, no one saw how Dugu Jian attacked. When the stunning sword beam entered the glabella of a sword cultivator, the sound of a sword being unsheathed sounded from the battlefield. A streak of blood seeped out from the glabella of the sword cultivator. His life force decreased sharply. That person's consciousness had already been pierced by Dugu Jian's sword chi, and his essence spirit was destroyed. One of the 7 sword cultivators was dead. The 7 luminaries' sword formation was broken. Everyone, let's work together and kill this demon. A sword cultivator glared at Su Zimo with bloodshot eyes, wishing he could skin the latter alive. Almost 20 sword cultivators swarmed forward. Humph! Su Zimo swung his saber in reverse and slashed through the air. Blood chi filled the air. Suddenly, a gigantic purgatory appeared on the battlefield and sucked in all 20 sword cultivators. Su Zimo had not gained nothing from his month of seclusion in the cave abode on the mountain peak. At the very least, he had gained a lot in terms of the saber Dao. With the help of the words left behind by Yan Beichen, he managed to comprehend the terrifying Shura saber intent. Although he had not spent much time with Yan Beichen, the latter's attainments in the saber Dao were extremely deep. After a round of guidance, many of Su Zimo's problems in the saber Dao were resolved. His saber technique became purer, and his saber intent was even more condensed. Su Zimo waved his saber and slashed out layers of saber shadows. A series of ghostly wails and howls could be heard from the battlefield, causing one to feel uneasy. Cultivators with weaker wills would break down mentally. A sword cultivator's mind wavered slightly, and was killed by Su Zimo with a single slash. Blood flowed like rivers in the purgatory. In this viscous river of blood, horrifying skeletons crawled up and attacked the sword cultivators present. This was not an illusion. This was a product of saber intent. Every single skeleton was condensed from dermic powers, and was extremely powerful. Trapped in the whitebone purgatory, the sword cultivators of Sword Sect fought for themselves and were completely separated. With a terrifying sword cultivator like Dugujian by their side, the sword cultivators of Sword Sect died continuously. In the blink of an eye, there were only 10 sword cultivators left. When Dao Bing Li Quan saw that the situation was dangerous and that they would all die if this dragged on, a vicious glint flashed through his eyes. Conjuring a few extremely mysterious dermic seals, Dao Bing Li Quan bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a stream of essence blood. Burn! Instantly the essence blood burned. At the same time, Dao Bing Li Quan's aura surged and became extremely sharp as he slashed viciously at the purgatory beside him. Boom! The purgatory shook and collapsed. Su Zimo could tell that Dao Bing Li Quan was weak and said indifferently, "Now that you've released such a secret skill that burns one's essence spirit, you'll stop at the void reversion realm from now on." Dao Bing Li Quan and the others escaped and sped into the distance immediately. Turning around, Dao Bing Li Quan glared at Su Zimo with a venomous expression and grit his teeth. "Su Zimo, at the very least we can return alive. As for you, you'll be buried here. As for you, Su Zimo, don't even think about leaving alive after entering this place. There are countless experts here who want your life. Ha 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 ha. You're wrong about something." Su Zimo shook his head gently and said indifferently, "You guys won't be able to escape." Before he could finish his sentence, Su Zimo conjured his sword fingers and slashed gently in the direction that Dao Bing Li Quan was escaping in a relaxed manner. Chi! A white sword beam burst forth from Su Zimo's fingertip and almost instantly, it descended in front of Dao Bing Li Quan. The 10 sword cultivators turned around and defended with their swords. Only Dao Bing Li Quan's expression changed and his pupils constricted. He could smell the aura of death from that sword chi. Poof! Chi! The sword chi streaked through the swords of the 10 sword cultivators and entered their bodies without any obstruction. A terrifying killing intent burst forth and surged into the spirit platform, mincing their essence spirits instantly. The 10 swords were all broken. The 10 sword cultivators were sliced into 2 by the sword chi and blood splattered in the void. Countless organs rolled out and a stench filled the air. There was dead silence beneath the gigantic sword. When the surrounding cultivators saw that, their eyes widened and they felt chills run down their spines as their hair stood on end. The might of the heaven-slaying sword art was terrifying. Chapter 996. The dust had settled. Dugujian looked at Su Zimo and nodded without saying anything. He was a man of few words and had a reclusive personality. In reality, his actions were to express his gratitude to Su Zimo. Su Zimo understood and smiled back. On the one hand, he attacked because of Dugujian. On the other hand, it was because the 7 perfected void reversion sword cultivators of Sword Sect were targeting him to begin with. If he killed these sword cultivators now, it would save him from any unforeseen events in the future. Dugujian ignored the storage bag dropped by the Sword Sect cultivator, and arrived beneath the gigantic sword. Raising his head, his initially empty eyes gradually burned with passion. His withered eyes gradually regained some vigor. Unlike the other cultivators, Dugu Jian did not establish a Dao heart and merely looked at the gigantic sword before him in a daze. That gaze was pure. In Dugu Jian's eyes, there was nothing else apart from the sword Dao. There was no need to shout. All the cultivators present could sense Dugu Jian's Dao heart. It was just the sword. Swoosh! Suddenly a terrifying storm appeared around the gigantic sword, connecting the heavens and earth with a terrifying might. Most shocking of it all was that extremely fierce sword chi emanated from within the storm, and it minced the surrounding space into pieces. A legacy phenomenon had appeared. The storm howled and swept Dugu Jian into it, disappearing before everyone's eyes. Su Zimo waited for Dugu Jian's figure to disappear before collecting the storage bags dropped by the sword sect cultivators on the ground. While there might not be any top-tier treasures in those storage bags, there were definitely quite a number of elixir consumables. The surrounding cultivators did not disperse and looked at Su Zimo from afar with complicated expressions. There was excitement, wariness, enmity and fear. The space of the Dao inheritance ground was not too big. Before long, the news of this battle would spread throughout the entire Dao inheritance ground, and everyone would know that he had entered. At that time his test would truly begin. Su Zimo did not want to fight Di'in so soon. Although he had entered the Dao inheritance ground, he knew his limits. His scarlet-haired Yin spirit and bloodline were restricted, and his chances of winning against Di'in were extremely low. Therefore, he planned to challenge the Three Tribulations domain first. It would be best if he could obtain the inheritance he wanted. Although he wouldn't be able to break through to the Return to Void stage, his combat prowess would still increase. Su Zimo's figure flashed as he executed the lightning escape technique. His entire body transformed into a bolt of purple lightning as he sped into the distance. Su Zimo left. Hurry up and follow them. There will definitely be a good show to watch. Many cultivators moved and chased after him. Although Su Zimo's cultivation realm was low, the power of his black-haired essence spirit was no weaker than a void reversion. Coupled with the lightning escape technique, there were very few cultivators who could keep up with him. Even so, there were still some void reversions who were good at tracking behind him. Su Zimo frowned slightly. He didn't want to expose himself too early. Suddenly, a pair of huge magic wings grew out of his back. With a flap of its wings, its speed skyrocketed. Whoosh! The purple lightning tore through the air and disappeared before everyone's eyes without a trace. Shaking off the cultivators behind him, Su Zimo sprinted in the direction of the Three Tribulations domain. Along the way, he did not stop at all the inheritances he saw and sped away. A day later, Su Zimo gradually slowed down and consumed elixirs to recover his stamina as he walked. Before long, a golden beam of light flew over from the skies behind him at an alarming speed. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Even with his lightning escape technique coupled with the augmentation of ethereal wings, his speed was only SOSO. This was the first top expert he had seen since entering the Dao inheritance ground. The golden light flashed past his head and sped into the distance without stopping. Before long, the golden light stopped and revealed the figure of a cultivator. He wore a shimmering golden robe and was tall with long hair that draped over his shoulders. The golden-robed cultivator turned around and smiled at Su Zimo. "Fellow Taoist, may I ask if you've seen a purple thunderbolt pass by here?" Su Zimo swept his gaze across the person's sleeve. Glass Palace's emblem. Just as Extreme Fire and the others had expected, apart from Chaos Essence Sect, Sword Sect, Heavenly Dipper Sect and Zephyr Thunder Palace, there were indeed other super sects that sent experts in. The golden-robed cultivator was slightly stunned when he saw Su Zimo's appearance. After checking Su Zimo's cultivation realm, the golden-robed cultivator retracted his smile and narrowed his eyes with a cold glint. Needless to say, he had already guessed Su Zimo's identity. The two of them stood facing each other, less than 30 feet apart. Both of them were expressionless and motionless. Both of them were tense and were searching for the other party's flaws. Killing intent filled the air. A battle could break out at any moment. "If I'm not mistaken, you're Su Zimo, right?" In such a tense atmosphere, the golden-robed cultivator was the first to speak and asked slowly, easing the killing intent between the two of them. Su Zimo asked, "Who are you?" My Dao title is. Pausing for a moment, the golden-robed cultivator opened his mouth and spat out 2 words, glass. His Dao title was Glass, titular disciple. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. To think that the first titular disciple he encountered after entering the teleportation ground would be from Glass Palace. Boom! The moment Su Zimo's mind stirred, Dao being Glass's eyes lit up and he suddenly attacked. This timing could be said to be perfect. Grasped without the slightest mistake, he crossed the 30 feet distance instantly. Glass Palace was one of the sects that specialized in body tempering the most in the cultivation world. It was extremely famous and was on par with Overlord Palace of the Fiend sects and Diamond Monastery of the Buddhist monasteries. Glass Palace cultivators were strong in melee combat, and could even wrestle with demon beasts. In this aspect, Dao being Glass was even more terrifying. Splash! Su Zimo felt a golden light fill his vision as his blood chi surged, and the sound of a tsunami echoed in his ears. Dao being Glass had already cultivated his bloodline to the tsunami blood realm. Up till this point of his cultivation, there were less than 5 people that Su Zimo had encountered who could cultivate their bloodline to this realm. Dao being Glass's fist surged with bloodline and shone brightly like a blazing sun, releasing a scorching and violent aura. This was a true expert. With just a single move, Su Zimo was completely disadvantaged. Su Zimo's mind wavered, and he had already lost the initiative. Now that Dao being Glass had closed in, he did not even have the chance to touch his storage bag and summon Heaven Splitter. Su Zimo raised his right hand and clenched it into a fist, punching Dao being Glass's fist viciously. The fists collided. Boom! There was a deafening sound. Both of them shuddered. Su Zimo took half a step back and his expression changed slightly. His right hand had the divine phoenix bone and was fine. However, his entire right arm was numb. It was clear how great the impact was. Without being able to activate his bloodline, even with the divine phoenix bone in his right hand, he could not defend against the power released by Dao being Glass. Dao being Glass's pupils constricted as well. He had already heard that the demon bloodline in Su Zimo's body would be suppressed after entering the Dao inheritance ground, and his combat strength would be greatly reduced. To think that even so, he did not have an absolute advantage despite having the initiative. If it was any other cultivator, they would be severely injured if they were roared by Su Zimo at this distance. In serious cases, their essence spirits might even be shaken to death. Sound Domain Secret Skill. Against Dao being Glass's melee combat suppression, some dermic arts could not be released in time. However, Sound Domain secret skills were instantaneous. Making use of the collision between the Creation Qinglian and the Rainbow Glazed Pagoda, Su Zimo released his Sound Domain secret skill and counterattacked domineeringly. Apart from the Sound Domain secret skill, he had another instantaneous secret skill among his trump cards. Visual Technique. The Illumination Dragon Eye could not be activated in the Dao Inheritance ground. However, Su Zimo could release the Illumination Sword formation. The 36 flying swords transformed from the Illumination Stone were hidden in his right eye. At the same time that the Sound Domain secret skill was released, the 36 flying swords shot out through Su Zimo's right eye towards Dao being Glass's face. Dao being Glass had already forced Su Zimo to use all his trump cards without holding back. Chapter 998. Glass Eye. Dao being Glass reacted and released his visual technique right away as well. Instantly, his eyes were shrouded with a mysterious luster, resembling 2 sparkling gems that were even brighter than the stars in the night sky. 2 rainbow-colored divine lights burst forth from his eyes, enveloping the 36 flying swords that were coming at him. The 36 flying swords shuttled through the rainbow divine light and became slower, as though they were stuck in a swamp and could not move an inch. The might of the glass divine light was shocking, and even superior-grade dermic weapons would be turned into scrap metal instantly if they were enveloped by it. Although the 36 flying swords were not dermic weapons, they were conjured by the Illumination Stone. Even the Dharma Daojun would not be able to corrode the illumination stone, let alone the glass divine light released by a void reversion. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. The 36 flying swords stopped advancing and suddenly retreated, streaking in midair, leaving behind sword scars that formed a terrifying sword formation. Clang! 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 The illumination sword formation was formed and crushed forward viciously. Shing! The rainbow divine light was broken through by the illumination sword formation, and the sword chi was extremely sharp. Suddenly it burst forth and entered Dao Being Glass's eyes. Ah! Dao Being Glass shrieked tragically when he encountered this change. His eye sockets were bleeding profusely. Both of his eyes were already blind. The crowd was in an uproar. Nobody expected that just now, Su Zimo was still being suppressed by Dao Being Glass. In the blink of an eye, such a huge reversal would occur. How could Su Zimo miss out on such an opportunity? The illumination sword formation continued to crush and slash towards Dao Being Glass's head. Body like glass, clear inside and out, pure and flawless, indestructible. Although Dao Being Glass was blind, he calmed down immediately and chanted the mnemonic of the Glass Heart Sutra. Suddenly a powerful force burst forth. Suddenly a mysterious glow shrouded Dao Being Glass's body. It was flawless and indestructible like glass. Clang! The moment everything was done, the candlelight sword formation slashed down with an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing. Dao Being Glass's head was still intact against the sharpness of the candlelight sword formation. What was even more frightening was that the candlelight sword formation was shattered by the rebounding power, and could not be condensed again. Even if both eyes were blind, Daoist Glaze's combat strength was still very terrifying. But after this exchange, Daoist Glaze's advantage was gone, and Su Zimo seized the upper hand. Liuli, you lost. Su Zimo shouted loudly, his aura surging like a rainbow. He took a step forward and extended his palm, slapping down towards Daoist Liuli's head. 1,000-ton finger. Daoist Glaze stretched out a finger and his magic power gushed out. His entire finger seemed to have condensed into jade, containing the power of 10,000 caddies as it pierced towards Su Zimo's chest. At the same time, Daoist Glass's glabella flickered and shot out a 7-colored light of divine sense towards Su Zimo's glabella. Essence Spirit Secret Skill. Even if Dao Being Glass was blind, he could still rely on his spirit consciousness to fight. But now, even his Essence Spirit Secret Skill was released. It was clear that Dao Being Glass was already in a frenzy, and was willing to disregard everything to kill Su Zimo. This is the true trump card of a void reversion. It's a difference of a single move. If Dao Being Glass had released his Essence Spirit Secret Skill earlier, he wouldn't have ended up in this state. He's even released his Essence Spirit Secret Skill. The outcome of this battle is about to be decided. Just as the crowd was discussing, a sacred Buddhist light shone from Su Zimo's left wrist and enveloped him. Mingwang prayer beads. The 7-colored light collided with the Buddhist light. After a brief pause, the Buddhist light shattered. Of course, most of the power of the Essence Spirit Secret Skill was blocked by the Buddhist light as well. The remnant spirit consciousness surged into Su Zimo's consciousness and was sliced apart by the creation Qinglian seed easily, turning into nothingness. It's an Essence Spirit Dermic weapon. What Essence Spirit Dermic weapon can defend against an Essence Spirit Secret Skill of a titular disciple? Su Zimo is indeed filled with treasures. Many cultivators looked at Su Zimo's left wrist with fervent gazes. At that moment, Su Zimo was even more shocked. Back at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party, the 5 void reversions joined forces and released their Essence Spirit Secret Skills, but they could not injure him at all. But now, a single Essence Spirit Secret Skill shattered the barrier formed by the Mingwang prayer beads. If another Essence Spirit Secret Skill of the same power was released, it would be able to threaten his Essence Spirit. This was the power of the spirit consciousness of a titular disciple. If not for the fact that he had dermic weapons such as the Mingwang prayer beads and the creation Qinglian seed, he would have been killed in a single move. This was also his greatest weakness at the moment. Without cultivating to the void reversion realm, one could not conjure Essence Spirit Secret Skills and could only defend passively. Su Zimo was shocked. At that moment, Dao Being Glass was shocked. That Essence Spirit Secret Skill was a secret skill of Glass Palace that was not passed down and was extremely ferocious. Even a void reversion of the same cultivation realm could be killed with ease, let alone Jinying Zhenjuan. The reason why Dao Being Glass did not escape immediately despite being blind was because he wanted to rely on that essence spirit secret skill to kill Su Zimo. Even if he could not kill the latter on the spot, he had to severely injure the latter. However, he had not expected that Su Zimo would be able to withstand his essence spirit secret skill as though nothing had happened. At this point of the battle, Dao Being Glass wanted to retreat. However, Su Zimo would not give him the chance to escape. Dao Being Glass's 1,000-ton finger had already closed in. Su Zimo's eyes lit up as he clenched his right fist and took the 1,000-ton finger head-on. At the same time, he extended his left hand and placed it on Dao Being Glass's arm in a seemingly soft manner. Curl and tremble. Bang! First, the fist and finger collided with a crushing force. Although Su Zimo's right hand managed to defend against the 1,000-ton finger, it was already a bloody mess. If not for the divine phoenix bone, that palm might have been shattered by a single finger. That was the terror of titular disciples. A centipede died but did not fall over. Even if Dao Being Glass was blind, the power he released was still enough to threaten Su Zimo's life. If there was any mistake, he would still die. After thrusting out the 1,000-ton finger, Dao Being Glass wanted to turn and retreat. However, Su Zimo's left hand was already on his arm that he could not retract in time. A strange power burst forth. His arm seemed to be constantly twisted and torn by this power. Poof! The flesh and blood on his arm exploded, bursting into a cloud of blood mist. Ah! Dao Being Glass could not hold it in and let out another tragic cry. He felt as though his bones were about to be crushed by that strange power. Before he could react, Su Zimo grabbed his arm with both hands and lifted him up. He drew an arc in midair and smashed into the ground. Boom! The ground quaked. The hearts of many cultivators shuddered and their eyelids twitched. Boom! Before anyone could react, Su Zimo grabbed Dao Being Glass's arm and pulled him out of the mud pit once more, smashing him to the other side. The cultivators widened their eyes in shock. To think that a titular disciple of Glass Palace would be reduced to such a state where he was smashed around without the strength to retaliate. Chapter 999. Bang! 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 Su Zimo swung Dao Being Glass's body and smashed him here and there, creating a gigantic human-shaped crater on the ground with every hit. Sand and gravel flew and mud churned. Many cultivators felt their teeth ache. If it was them, their bodies would have been smashed into meat paste after a few hits. But now Dao Being Glass's body was still intact. However, his body was tattered and riddled with wounds. Su Zimo tossed Dao Being Glass to the ground casually and strode forward, stomping on the latter's chest. Snap! Dao Being Glass's chest caved in slightly and his bones were broken. If it was any other void reversion that tempered their body, Su Zimo's kick would have been enough to pierce their chest. However, Dao Being Glass was still not fatally injured. It was just that his tendons and bones were almost shattered by Su Zimo and his strength was scattered. He could not retaliate. Glass Palace is nothing more than that. Su Zimo looked down at Dao Being Glass and said coldly, "Titular disciples are still going to be trampled beneath my feet." Fufu cough cough. Dao Being Glass coughed out blood and looked at Su Zimo with his blind eyes, panting. "Su Zimo, let me go. There's still room for negotiation in our feud." At this point, Dao Being Glass could no longer care about his dignity. Even though he knew that countless cultivators were watching, he could only choose to bow down and beg for mercy in order to survive. Su Zimo's gaze was cold and he was unmoved as he shook his head. "There's no room for negotiation in our feud." When Glass Palace vented their anger on the mortals of the 13 cities of Yen country, Su Zimo and Glass Palace were already at odds with each other. Furthermore, Su Hong left with a knot in his heart because of this matter. Xuanyu Daoren had even crippled Su Zimo and forced him into the Dragon Burial Valley. After that, Glass Palace did not give up on hunting down Su Zimo. Now that Su Zimo had arrived in the Middle Continent and Glass Palace had even sent a titular disciple to hunt him down, there was no way he could turn things around. How could he turn back? Between Su Zimo and Valurium Palace, only one would survive. Of course, even the current Su Zimo was still not qualified to fight against the Valurium Palace. However, that did not stop him from trampling on Glass Palace's reputation and killing Dao Being Glass here. Sensing Su Zimo's determination, Dao Being Glass suddenly panicked and grit his teeth. Su Zimo, I'm the titular disciple of Glass Palace. Since you dared to kill a titular disciple, you've caused a huge disaster. You can't afford to bear it. A great calamity? A hint of mockery flashed across Su Zimo's eyes as he said with a cold smile, even if I poke a hole in the sky, I'm also fearless. The reason why I, Su Zimo, dared to come here is to kill titular disciples. The group of cultivators was greatly shaken. He was going to kill titular disciples. Throughout history, no one had dared to say such words. No one dared to even think about it. The moment he said that, Su Zimo swiped his storage bag and took out a grayish-black mountain. It was one of the 7 unique treasures, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Your physique is strong, Su Zimo said with a murderous aura. Let's see how strong you are. The Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded in Su Zimo's palm and covered the skies. A huge shadow condensed above Dao Being Glass's head and crashed down. Boom! The Mystic Magnet Mountain smashed onto Dao Being Glass's body. Crack! 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 The sound of bones cracking rang out continuously, sending chills down one's spine. There was no need to look. All the cultivators knew that Dao Being Glass's body was completely crippled. Shoo! Before the Mystic Magnet Mountain descended, a tiny golden figure had already escaped from Dao Being Glass's head at an extremely fast speed. His essence spirit had left his body. Unless it was absolutely necessary, cultivators would not abandon their bodies, let alone ones as strong as Dao Being Glass's. But now he was already forced into a desperate situation. Su Zimo, I'll definitely take revenge for today's grudge in the future. Dao Being Glass's essence spirit sped into the distance. Without the tendons and bones of his physical body, his essence spirit was extremely fast. He believed that given Su Zimo's movement technique, there was no way he could catch up. Su Zimo stood on the spot motionlessly. It was true that he could not catch up to Dao Being Glass's essence spirit with lightning escape and ethereal wings. However, there was no need for him to chase after him. Su Zimo conjured hand seals with both hands and looked at Dao Being Glass's essence spirit. 2 balls of flame seemed to be burning in his eyes as he hollered softly, "Rise." Suddenly, a wall of flames rose from the ground far away, emitting a scorching heat wave that blocked Dao Being Glass's path instantly. Ah! Dao Being Glass's essence spirit shrieked and stopped in his tracks. His escaping speed was extremely fast and he almost crashed into it. If he had a physical body, he could have barged through directly. The power of the wall of flames would not be able to hurt him at all. But now, he was only left with his essence spirit. His essence spirit felt a scorching pain after being hit by the wall of flames for a moment, and its glow dimmed significantly. Once he crashed into it, he would be burned to ashes instantly. Dao Being Glass's essence spirit stopped in its tracks and wanted to escape. However, Su Zimo would not give him another chance. Transform! Su Zimo hollered softly. Under countless gazes, the flames of the wall of flames condensed continuously. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a gigantic python with wings and flames burning all over its body with a torrential ferocious aura. Primordial divine beast soaring snake. This change caused everyone to feel a sense of amazement. Legend has it that Hakya Dojin was once the #1 fire controller. Seems like Su Zimo has already obtained his legacy. He should be a mighty figure of extreme fire now. This person's fire controlling technique has already reached the acme of perfection. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. The primordial soaring snake flapped its wings and flew forward. Its massive body shrouded the head of Dao Being Glass's essence spirit with a ferocious gaze. Dao Being Glass shrieked and turned to flee. The primordial soaring snake opened its mouth and spat out a ball of blazing flames. Countless flames rained down from the skies and drowned Dao Being Glass's essence spirit. Ah! Dao Being Glass's essence spirit burned with raging flames. He struggled in midair, but the flames on his body would not extinguish. The primordial soaring snake glided over and opened its bloodied mouth, devouring Tao being Glass's essence spirit. The tragic cries stopped abruptly. The titular disciple of Glass Palace had died in the Tao inheritance ground. When they saw that, the cultivators were silent for a long time with unconcealable shock in their eyes. Titular disciples. They could be considered as the strongest disciples of the super sex, and were existences that could kill above their levels with limitless potential. Every single one of them was an existence that everyone looked up to. But now, the titular disciple was still killed mercilessly by another cultivator. Furthermore, he was killed by Jining Zhenjuan. Is this the #1 monster incarnate of history? If this person grows up, who will be able to stop him in the future? He probably won't have the chance to grow up. You have to know that there are still a few titular disciples waiting for him in the Tao inheritance ground. Also, don't forget about Tao being Chaos Essence Dean. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.